The Thinking Tackle Podcast.
Following our first podcast with Tom, he went away to Farnham Flint and only goes and catches the biggest common carp in the lake. So we kindly asked Tom if he would come back into the studio to give us the exclusive story on his most recent capture. So here it is. Hope you enjoy it. Tom, there's been a twist. At the end of the last show, we said when you catch something else, come back on the show again. Well, actually, it wasn't very long until you caught your target fish, was it?
It wasn't at all. Didn't expect to be back this quick, but there you go, here I am.
Yeah, so you were fishing on Flint, and there's a big common in that lake.
There is indeed, yeah. Not one that I can totally expect it to catch, to be honest, because it's a very rare fish. I think it's 18 months since the last time it's been caught, or thereabouts, maybe 14 months. But yeah, obviously last time we were here.
Well, it was the weekend after you came on this podcast.
It was.
You sent me a picture through on this. I think it was the Sunday, and it's like, don't waste too much time there.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I didn't expect that. Really didn't expect it to come that quick, but yeah, I think the trip before I'd come here last, I'd done all right, and I'd had three, but three good uns, but they were all repeats, unfortunately. Then I came here that Friday, left here on the Friday night, and drove down there late on the Friday. By the time I got there, it was too late to set up really. Plus the lake was packed, absolutely packed out. It's been super busy. And I've just been slotting in, especially that time on a Friday night. It was packed out, but on the Saturday morning, I managed to get in a swim called the Murders. And I actually had 5 bites that trip, but nothing of any size. I lost 2 of them, unfortunately, to cut-offs down the left-hand margin. But if you know the layout of the lake at all, that Murders is sort of opposite the slab where I'd had the previous hit from, so the same sort of area of the lake. Anyway, the following week I've come back down sort of on the Thursday, gunning for that area. But unfortunately, couldn't get in there. Lake was super busy. I mean, really busy again. I ain't going to lie, I was a little bit disheartened when I turned up that Thursday, and there was nowhere. I couldn't get anywhere near that area that I fancied. But I took a bit of a look round, and one of, I think, 2 swims free on the lake was a swim round the pads.
So this is a little bay on the end of the lake.
Yeah. I say
how big is it in size?
It's a couple of acres. It used to be a bit bigger, but they've actually chopped it in half in recent years because they've turned half of it into some like day ticket lakes. But the pads bay, it's probably, I don't know, 1.5 acres, 2 acres, choked with pads. Real nice area of the lake that they do get in a lot, and it's an area that I have done quite a bit in the last sort of, say 6-8 weeks that I've been fishing on the lake. I've been doing a bit around there. You often see them around there.
Quite shallow, is it?
Not really, no.
Oh, it looks shallow, doesn't it?
But it's shallow in parts, but there are some good depths around there. And anyway, this swim was free, and it was a warm westerly wind. I looked across the bay, I could see it was free. It's an awkward swim to get to. I think that's why it was probably empty. You've got to sort of drive around up Cottage Lane. But as I say, it's a swim I'd done a bit in, so when I saw it was free, shot round there, set up in there. Didn't have a lot of other option really, but as I say, it did look quite good. There was a westerly wind which blows into that bay, and this big common that we've mentioned, it does seem to like that area. Although it doesn't get caught a lot, and we only know of a handful of captures of this fish, fair few of them have been in and around this bay. Whenever I've been fishing in that bay, I always feel relatively close to this fish. In fact, this swim I'm now set up in, I actually know that it got seen in there a couple of times last year, really close in. So that was always something that was on my mind whenever I fished in there. As I say, it always felt like an area that I could potentially get this fish from. It obviously likes it around there. But I've got to be honest, the only reason I set up around there this particular trip is because I couldn't get back in that sort of slab murder zone where I'd been catching them from the previous few weeks. Anyway, I set up in there that night, and I got 2 rods out on this lovely gravel hump. It's only 40 yards out. It's a spot that I've fished a couple of times when I've been in there. Not caught any. In fact, I've not caught anything out of this swim. Although I've done fair few nights in it over the previous sort of 6 to 8 weeks. Not caught anything. Often on the fish in there in the afternoon, but generally through the night they just sort of drift off back out into the main lake. Anyway, I've got the 2 rods out on this gravel hump. Flick the left one down the margin. There's a lovely little spot down the edge just by the bushes, by some bushes down to the left. And that night, I actually heard a couple show through the night in the bay, which was interesting. I had a couple of liners as well on these 2 rods fishing on the hump. And one of the shows at about 2 in the morning, not long after I'd had a liner, that's why I was awake, showed actually bang on the hump. So all of a sudden I'm thinking, hang on, they're in here in the night. It felt different to previous trips. So I'd sort of, although I didn't catch anything that night, I sort of woke up that morning as it was getting light. I say woke up, I didn't sleep a lot, with them showing and that. But I actually thought, this feels like a pretty good shout. Nothing happened that morning, but on the hump. But over towards the left-hand side of the bay, I saw 2 or 3 show and a bit of fizzing. I caught a tench off the hump, but that was it. So anyway, about 10 o'clock, I reeled in. Went and had a quick look around the main lake, just to be honest, because I did want to check to see if that slab or murders had come free. As I say, I'd caught a few from that zone in the previous few weeks. Very popular area of the lake. But I thought if I could slot in there, I would have done. But anyway, there's no chance of that. So I was only looking to see if those 2 swims were free. If they weren't, I knew I was going to stay in the pads. So anyway, gone back round to the pads. But that night, I've decided to move one of my rods. So I've reeled in a rod off the hump. It's quite this hump that I was just talking about that I put 2 rods on that night and caught a tench off. It's not the biggest feature in the world. 2 rods was a bit tight. So having seen this fish show on the left-hand side of the bay, I thought, I'm going to move a rod over. So that night, I've moved a rod over, that afternoon, onto the left-hand side of the bay sort of thing. So now I've got 1 on the bush, 1 on the left-hand side of the bay, and 1 on this hump. And it's quite silty, so I put a little pop-up over there where instead of, this was on the gravel. I was fishing gravel the previous night, but now I'm fishing the silt on the left. And got the rods out lovely. And that night was pretty quiet. I can't remember hearing anything show that night. And I actually thought, I've missed them. They've been in here the night before and they've done the off. But 7:30 the following morning, just after it got light, I had a bite on the rod that I'd moved over to the left in the silt. And it was a 27-pound mirror. Nice fish.
It's a bit of a boost, isn't it?
Yeah, so all of a sudden I thought, happy days, I've got one. It was worth staying. I'd done the right thing in staying. Well, I say done the right thing in staying. The lake was that busy, I couldn't really move anyway. So I'd caught one. Flicked the rod back out there, put 3 spoms over the top, rang Piers to come down and do some pictures before he opened up the cafe in the morning. And before Piers had even got there, I've had another bite on that same rod. Got that one in the net, quickly bundled it in the sling, didn't even notice at the time. But when I've got it out for pictures, when Piers got there, actually transpired it was one of the leenies. Now, these leenies, there's only a couple, as far as I'm aware. I thought there was 3 in there, a small one and 2 bigger ones, like upper 20s, scraper 30s. But in recent years, people are a bit dubious about the smaller one now. They think it might be a canal fish that came from Engie. So there's definitely 2. The 2 bigger ones, these upper 20s, are 2 original leenies. And I'm pretty sure they're the only 2 left. Although there are some big mirrors in that lake, they are much younger fish, simmos. In my mind, these 2 leenies are the ones, mega old carp, the last of the originals. They're the original fish that was stocked into Reading. Farnham Flint was the first lake to be stocked with carp in that area, so they are the original.
What, like 60s, I suppose, or is it they that old?
They're older. I thought they were mid-60s, but I'm pretty sure they were mid-50s. Now, that sounds ridiculous if that's true, but I'm pretty sure that's right. I think these fish are nigh on 70 years old. Like, I don't know of any carp that are older. But yeah, I might be wrong there. It might be mid-60s, but I'm sure it's earlier than that. But anyway, they are incredibly old. Anyway, as I've unzipped the sling, I've noticed that it's one of the bloody leenies, the bigger one of the two. We weighed it was £29. Awesome old fish. How I didn't realise when I netted it, I don't know. But there you go. Absolutely chuffed. And to be honest, catching that one fish made my session there and then. I'd caught a 27-pounder in this mega old leeny that morning. I was buzzing. Happy days, you know. Like I say, I'd have been happy at that. Anyway, saw a few more fish around the bay that day. Not loads, but a few, enough to keep me there. Got the rods out again that night. Kept the one on the hump, one in the sill, one on the bush. And 10:30 that night. I heard a few that night, including one real big one. Sloshed out, you know, it was one of those evenings, like going into dark, I say going into dark, it was already dark. One of those nights where you're really expecting something to happen almost. Anyway, 10:30 that night. And that same rod in the silt has gone again. I mean, this time it really fought. There's a few pads and that in the bay, as I've said, and it really sort of give a good account of itself in the pads. Got it in the net, shone the head torch on it, and I couldn't believe it. It was the other leeny. Like,
really?
Literally, I should have given you some pictures.
We will do. We'll put pictures up.
Yeah, I never even thought.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, so basically, I've had them both consecutive bites. In my mind, the two most sought after, special, you know, incredibly old mirrors that are in the lake. I've had them consecutive bites. And the second one, in my mind, is the better one. I had to do night shots because it was 10:30 at night, which was a bit of a shame.
Do they normally get caught together then? Do you see them together? What are the chances of that?
In all the years I've known them lakes, I don't think I've ever known anybody catch them two together, and I'm being totally honest. I've known in the past when there were more leanies in there, people would have caught 2 or 3 in a trip, but in recent, like I say, there's only 2 left now, and to get both of them consecutive, I mean, that was a ridiculous. They obviously hang around. I tell a lie, actually. I know a lady, Carla, my mate Billy's auntie. She caught them both, those same 2 fish. Now, I'm remembering this as we're speaking here. She caught them both on consecutive days about 8 years ago out the murder swim. And that's where the second one I caught, the scaly one, we actually now refer to that fish as Carla, because back then it was really rare. And because Carla caught it, it was always like, oh, that Carla fish. And now we just call it Carla. So she did catch them together on consecutive days. But so, yeah, I do know of them being caught together once before, actually, But to catch them both on the same day, you know, that was me. That was a dream trip in itself for me. Anyway, I got that rod back out that night, and it was funny. My mate was actually sat with me when I caught that fish, and although I'm absolutely buzzing, as you can imagine, I can remember actually making a comment to my mate. I've caught over 40 fish. At this point, I've caught over 40 fish out of that lake. Not this year. I think that was about my 10th or 11th fish since I've been on there, since I caught the baby black. But in years gone by, I'd caught 30 fish out of that lake and never caught any of the real big ones. And I can remember actually making a comment to my mate that night after we slipped Carla back. I was like, I've had over 40 fish out of this lake. Now, there's only about 70 to 100 in there, at a guess. Quite a few big ones. And I've caught over 40 fish. And I'm basically saying to my mate, I've not had any of them big ones. I've just got, I don't know, I tend to do that. I catch a lot of fish out of all the lakes I fish until I get the big ones. It's just how it goes. But anyway, he's left at about 11 o'clock, maybe a bit later than that. And I was really expecting something else to happen that night on the recast on that rod. I've had 3 bites now in that day, really, on that one rod in the silt over to the left-hand side of the bay. Not seen anything on the hump since that first night where I had those couple of liners and that one showed over and I caught a tench in the morning. I've not seen anything on the hump. So the next morning I woke up, not caught anything since Carla the night before. And they were showing now more in the middle of the bay, sort of to the right, between the two rods really. I've got a rod on the hump, rod over to the left in the silt, and they're sort of showing in this deep silty area in the middle of the bay between the two rods. And I actually sat there, it's Sunday morning now, and I can remember thinking, if I was doing another night now, I'd move that rod off the hump and I'd put it there. And just as these sort of thoughts are going through my mind, it's about 7:30 in the morning, I've had a real tenchy bite off the hump. Now, don't forget, I've had a tench off that hump 2 days previously. Yeah. So I've had this tenchy bite. I mean, I'm fishing braid, it's 40 yards out, and it's just, the bobbin's just sort of gently pulled up and the tip's bounced a bit. Now, this is going to sound soft, but I was actually down to my last 3 4-ounce leads, 4-ounce distance leads. The last 3, I'd lost a lot of leads the last few trips, and especially this particular trip we're talking about, I'm down to my last 3 4-ounce leads. I did have other leads in the bag, but these are the leads I was using and catching them on. You know what it's like. It's nice to. So I'm conscious of the fact that the last 3 leads I've got are on the rods. Anyway, I've had this tenchy bite, and using the heli safes, I fish a bead above the heli safe, which sits quite tight on the lead core. Now, if you're really gentle when you get a tench, sometimes you can keep the lead on fishing like this. So because I'm convinced it's a tench, I've just picked the rod up and I'm just coaxing it in. And because it's just coming towards me, and I didn't feel any head shakes or anything, I'm just literally winding. And it's got about halfway back, and I've sort of noticed that the braid is kiting, it's cutting across to the right, and I'm thinking, that's kiting a bit for a tench. And yeah, it's carried on kiting. Anyway, there's quite a big weed bed down to my right-hand side, down the margin. The swim I'm in, as I said, I might have just mentioned it earlier, but these swims have only been open to night fishing. I don't know if I've mentioned this previously.
No, you didn't actually.
Yeah, they were open last year as day swims, and they were only open this year as night. The one was open this year as a night swim, just because the lake's been so busy. That is another reason as to why we kept saying this big one could get caught from there, because it's never really been overly fished, this area of the lake, not properly. The bay gets full of pads. In fact, this hump that I'm fishing to, you couldn't get to it without casting over at least 40 yards of pads until this year. So I'm actually now fishing this hump at this time of year that's probably never really, I don't know what other people have done in that swim, but it's a zone that's not been fished a lot. Let's just say that. Anyway, I'm playing this fish, and there's a big weed bed down to the right, and as it's swinging the back of I'm still thinking it's a tench at this point, but it's swinging the back of this weed bed down the right hand margin. And as it's done so, and my braid's now sort of running around the front of the, it's just, people who use braid will probably know what I'm on about. I started getting that creaking sound, and it just got heavier and heavier and heavier. And just as I'm thinking, bloody hell, this is heavy, and then all of a sudden I felt those 2 big kicks on the end of the rods. I thought, this is a carp. And at that, this massive tail's just slapped out the water 10 yards down the margin to my right, the back of this weed bed. I thought, bloody hell, got one on, and it's a big one. And obviously, what I'd imagine's actually happened is this fish has picked up my rig off the hump, and it's all deep, snaggy margins, right and left, and like this swim I'm in. And I think it's just picked my rig up off the hump, and it's just heading to these snags down to the right. And all I'm doing, thinking I'm coaxing attention, is just picking up the slack line. And I've eventually caught up with it down the right hand margin. Anyway, once I've realised it was a carp, I've give it the book, because it's now the other side of a weed bed down the right near the snags. And I've just sort of brought it back underneath this weed bed that's down the edge. So like it's got weed all over its head and that now. And I've brought it up, it's popped up in front of me, and I just saw this huge common. The minute I saw it pop up, I knew it was this fish. And I'm not going to go and say it did this, it did that, because it didn't do a lot. It just sort of wallowed around a bit on the surface. It had a bit of a surge off. I've got the net. I've sort of shuffled it under it, give it the butt, really. Didn't give it anything. And, yeah, there it was in the net.
Oh, my God, what a story.
And there it is.
Yeah. And there it is, yeah.
Come on, size of that.
Yeah, absolute beast.
Just a bit bigger than a tench.
Yeah,
just
a little bit
bigger than a 10.
Like you say,
so there you
totally
go.
feasible, isn't it?
But,
That's what.
yeah, unfortunately, I lost the lead as well.
Did you?
Yeah.
We need to send you some more leads, Tom. What a fish! What a story!
Yeah.
Do you find with that bay, because anglers can fish around that spit area, can't they?
Yeah, yeah.
Does that influence whether they get in there or not?
Well, that was another thing. That weekend, there are about 5 swims that fish into this bay, and being such a small area of water, if those swims are taken, obviously the bay is stitched. But other than one lad fishing the entrance, the bay was quiet that weekend. I had the bay to myself. The lake was busy, packed out, but nobody. As I say, it's a bit of funny enough, there's been 5 anglers on a night, I think, in the bay ever since.
Really?
But up until
What
then,
are they expecting?
it was a quiet area of the lake at that point.
We're looking at another picture now.
Yeah.
So the previous one was in the water. This one, God, what a picture that is.
You can see why they call it the Pristine Common, can't you? I mean, it is the mouth on it.
Yeah.
I've never seen a mouth so immaculate. Probably because it fights like a tench. But it doesn't get caught a lot. I mean, I know of about 7 or 8 captures.
What was that? 52? Did you say?
Yeah, 52.4. I don't think I've said, but yeah, 52.4 that was. Yeah, 52 pound 4 ounces. I mean, we were expecting it to be big. Mate of mine called it 49 pounds. The beginning of last year, but still, it's absolutely blew me away.
Keep bumping into these big commons, Tom, don't you?
I know. But yeah, never in a million years expected that. Yeah, generally, most of the lakes I've fished in the past, I've spent years on there, caught them all, and eventually worked my way up to the big one. But that was a little bit of luck, I think that was.
And we talked previously, like I say, you were on there to kind of fill the winter and stuff like that. So I guess you were kind of just enjoying the fishing on there anyway.
That was it. I wasn't actually. The funny thing is, if I'd have had my way, I don't know if I mentioned previously, I wouldn't have even been fishing there now. There's a fish I'd love to go and catch in the Cotswolds, and that was what I had my heart set on. Couldn't get my ticket because of this corona thing. They're not selling tickets at the minute. So that was just something to do for the time being. And, they say everything happens for a reason.
Fate, isn't it?
So they say.
Well, when you leave here now, right, don't immediately catch another 50 pounder, all right? Because we just want to get this podcast out first, and then
we'll
try
have
not
to get
to.
you back for a third.
But anyway, mate, Tom, thanks for coming back in and doing
mate.
this.
It's been a pleasure.
It was great that you went away and caught that fish like that. Awesome, mate. And like I say, we said before, you're a fantastic storyteller as well, and there seems to be a great story with all of these catches as well. So. Yeah, very well done.
Thank you.
Give it a few months, and when you catch a few more, you can come back.
Yeah.
Deal?
Yeah, that sounds good to me.
Okay.
I'd love to see you again.
Excellent. Tom, thanks very much.
No problem at all, mate. It's been a pleasure, as I say. Cheers.
So that was Tom's most recent capture. Now for the full podcast. Hope you enjoy this. Tom Stokes, we're live. Welcome to the podcast.
Welcome.
Looking forward to this?
I am.
Yeah, no, we're going to have a good chat. Before we really get underway, Tom, have you got a nice gift for us?
I have indeed. Right, this is the mesh off my landing net. Now, it's a bit holey and musty, but this is actually the net that I landed the Burghfield Common in. And not only did I land the Burghfield Common in that, I used that mesh for probably 8 or 9 years prior to that capture. So virtually everything I caught prior to the Burghfield Common, everything I caught from Burghfield, the Brute, the Dorchester fish, everything I caught that was worth catching really has been in that net.
So have you just taken it off the arms now, or have you been using another net?
No, I've had a new. I'll just hold it. I don't know.
If you want to hold it up to that camera there.
Where's the camera?
Yeah. So the Burghfield Common has been in that net.
Yeah, they've all been in that net.
The Brute and
as I say, it's got a few holes in it and whatnot.
Mate,
Brute's been in there. Yeah.
That's a great gift.
So there you go.
Isn't it?
You can have that.
Yeah. You sad to let that go?
Smells a bit. Not really.
It smells lovely in here.
I'll tell you what. Yeah, we're going to need some more air conditioner in here, Tove, I think. Yeah.
It's been sat in the garage for nearly the last 2 years. I did use it a bit after I caught the common. I caught a couple of the Englefish using that mesh, but yeah, I decided it was time to retire it after that.
What, you purposely retired it?
Not purposely, no, but mainly because it's got a few holes in it, and I didn't want anything escaping from it.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's been sat in the garage, and I thought, if I don't you might as well have it, otherwise it's going to be sat there forever.
Well, we love that too, won't we?
Yeah, no, that good addition that is.
Yeah, we haven't got any nets at the moment. We've got loads of books and stuff, and no, we've got a nice little selection. Yeah, so thank you very much for that.
No problem at all.
I've got a question to ask you. I was looking on Instagram actually. 2 weeks in paradise. You were putting some pictures up of some lakes.
Oh yeah, that's a little syndicate. 2 months in paradise, was it?
Was it 2 months?
When was this? Was this a recent post?
Do you know what? I'm putting you on the spot here. Do you know why? Because when I saw Pierce last week.
yeah.
I think he just wanted a mention on the podcast.
Yeah. No, that's that's a nice little syndicate I'm on called Wellman's in Reading. Yeah.
Are we allowed to talk about this one?
You can, I suppose.
Yeah.
I mean, if Piers has mentioned it, I'm sure he'll be all right.
Yeah.
It's it's just a little close syndicate, 15 man syndicate, covers 3 lakes, in Reading, just off the M4.
We won't say too much.
It literally is paradise. All I'll say is it's paradise.
It's paradise.
He
did tell me about it.
Do whatever you want.
Brilliant.
A lot of the fish have never seen a hook. Not many places like that about, is there?
No.
So yeah,
sorry to put you on the spot.
No, you're all right.
It's all Pierce's fault anyway. So if we mention
it.
the lake and he says, "Oh, why are you mentioning my lake?" It's because
I don't think there's a waiting list anyway. So
there's no waiting list.
It doesn't matter.
But no, it looks good. It looks good.
It is.
So I came out to see you last week at Farnham Flint.
You did, yeah.
It looks like a really, really nice venue. So at the moment, you're slotting in there at the moment in between places.
Yeah, it's just a gap filler, really. I mean, obviously, I caught the baby black 6 weeks or so now, wasn't it? 6 weeks ago. Time flies, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's got to have been 6 weeks, if not nearly 2 months. And the plan was to go elsewhere. The plan was to go up to the Cotswolds, but due to the corona, the lake I want to get a ticket on, although it's a club water, they're basically not selling tickets at the minute. So Farnham Flint is on the same ticket as Burghfield, so I thought, why not? A lot of big fish in there. I have done bits on Flint in the past, caught a few of them, but never caught any of the real big ones. So, why not? It is a busy lake, but, a nice lake to have a go on.
I mean, it's a different challenge for you as well, isn't it?
It is. It's a bit more laid back. Like we were saying earlier, for the last sort of 10 years or so, I've been, flat out campaign fishing, shall we say. All this time of year now, normally I am flat out doing as much time as I can, usually 3 nights a week. I'd like to do more. Baiting, fishing for fish of my dreams as such, and that creates quite a stressful, I don't know what the word is, but it can be quite stressful, let's say. Yeah. Wondering if the big one's going to get caught, if anyone's going to drop on your bait, or, there's all kinds of things that, can cause worry. And, since
you don't get the same feeling fishing on there.
No, because it's a busy lake. I'm just turning up on a weekend and trying to slot in like everybody else. I'm not baiting as such. There's a relatively good head of fish in there, so you don't really need to bait. You've just got to get on them. And it's been quite relaxed, really. I've been quite enjoyed it, really.
Got some pictures, Tabe. You caught some fish last week, didn't you?
I did.
Nice selection of fish as well.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
Yeah.
I caught 3, which makes a change.
Is that a good session for you on there?
On that,
one of them up there.
Oh yeah. That's one they call Golden Scaly. That one is. That was a 26-pounder. Real nice old fish, that one. Not one of the original leenies, I don't think. I don't know where that came from, but it is an incredibly old fish.
Looks old.
And I have caught that one before, actually, about 4 or 5. In fact, all these 3 fish that we're about to see, I have caught before. That was just.
Do you know when those fish went in there then? Because we were saying, like I say, I was speaking to Jules earlier about the lake, and this was 80s.
Yeah, the original leenies went in something ridiculous like 54. I was going to say 64, but I'm sure I've said 64 in the past and it's wrong. I think
it's even older.
They are incredibly old. There is only 2 or 3 left. Yeah, that's one they call the Lung Common, that one.
So we're looking at,
again,
it looks very empty as well, Tom.
It is. I mean, it's only just under 32 pounds there, but it's normally an upper 30, that fish. Quite a rare one. Doesn't come out a lot.
And that fish has got a lovely underslung mouth as well, hasn't it?
Oh, it's got one of the best mouths I've ever seen on a carp. That fish has absolutely mint, white rubbery lips. Again, it's one I've caught before. I'm going to say, you're going to think I've caught all the fish out this lake, but I've only dabbled on there in the past. I was just unfortunate, and although I had a good trip this weekend, the 3 fish I caught are fish that I've caught in the past. But no, it was 6-7 years ago I caught that fish before, and still nice one to catch.
Is it a grower, that one then, or do they tend to sort of hang around the same weight?
In fact, I'd say that one is probably on the downturn.
Is it?
It's an old fish that it sort of peaked at high 38 years ago, and it's never reached that since. As I say, it was just under £32 there. We're now at the end of August. It probably, I can't see it getting particularly big this year. It's a bit down in weight, really. Still a mega looking fish, but
the real prize on that lake, is it fair to say that there are a couple of commons in there that are big, and they are lovely carp.
These are just backup fish, but yeah, there are some mega fish in that lake. I think you're fishing, I'll probably upset a few people by saying this, but you're fishing for around 10-40 pounders in that lake, 3 over 49. A lot of 30 pounders.
I watched
some mega fish.
I watched Gaz Farnham's was it Reflections or something, and watching him on there with those fish. He had a couple of mirrors, didn't he? But they were obviously really, really spawned out.
Well, they were 2 of the biggest fish in the lake.
I heard him say that.
The one he had, Smiley, I think it's 35s or 36s in his video.
He had a 36 and a 30. Was it a 36 and a 38 or a 39?
Yeah, the bigger one of the 2 is a fish called Two-Tone.
Right.
Which has done £49 this spring. That's how, so it was well down. And then the other one was a fish called Smiley, which is 42, 43 pounder at the right time of year. Some big fish in there.
Yeah.
Not bad, really, for a club ticket.
No, it's not bad. It's not bad. Actually, you sent us some other pictures as well, which we will put up at the start, because you were fishing a Northern Mere. Was that last year?
No, that Northern Mere, that was 2013.
Right.
That was. I sent you those pictures just because they're fish that I've never mentioned in a podcast before, so I thought they might, people might find these interesting. But no, they. That's one they call the Scardlian.
And that is unbelievable. That's a cracking
basically
fish.
That is the fish that took me to this lake. It's in Shrewsbury, this Mere. 20-man syndicate. Again, pretty much dead man's shoes. I mean, how I got my ticket, I'll never know. I knew a few of the lads on there. My cousin was on there. And I was about 12th on the list at the time, which means nothing really. But by some miracle, somebody didn't take their ticket, and at the last minute they offered me a ticket out the blue. I took it, and had an incredible year's fishing on there. Caught a lot of them. I caught 26 fish that year, which was quite a lot.
How many fish in the lake?
It's hard to say. We didn't really know, but at the time it was estimated at maybe 40 or 50. And there's about a dozen 30 pounders. We're not talking monster fish here. We're just talking real old, special northern fish. But yeah, I fished hard all summer. Did really well through the summer. Actually came close to these in the summer. Especially, there's another one, the Chocolate Mirror. We'll probably see a picture in a minute. But I'd sort of started baiting a swim in July time. A swim called the Pines. That scarred mirror had been caught from there the 2 previous years in July. So I knew it was a good zone. I started baiting there, fishing there for a few weeks. Height of summer. It's a very deep lake. Not a lot was happening. And I eventually sort of broke the deadlock with a 28-pound common from the swim next door. There was 2 swims really close together. The Pines and the swim called No Man's, because nobody ever fishes it. Anyway, not a lot was happening in Pines. I'd been baiting it for a few weeks. Nothing had happened. And I clocked a couple show one morning down this pad line to the left of No Man's. So anyway, I dropped 1 rod in there. I still kept 2 rods out in the Pines. Dropped 1 in there, caught a 28-pounder common. Real nice fish. In fact, it's not been caught again to this day. That fish hasn't. I dropped in there and caught that fish, and it sort of threw me then. I'm going a bit off tangent here, but basically that same weekend, 2 of my other mates were fishing the lake. They were fishing the opposite bank in a swim called Winter Point in the Oak. Now, my one mate, I'm going a bit off tangent here, but my one mate, he split up with his missus that weekend. I'd just caught this 28-pounder out a no man's. I was buzzing. The other lad who he was fishing with on the other bank wasn't fishing the following weekend. My mate who'd split up with his missus was a bit depressed. So basically, I've turned around to him and said, you know what, mate, next weekend, come round and fish next to me in the Pines.
Cheer him up.
Yeah. And then, so anyway, he's done that. And he said, yeah, great. And I can remember on about Tuesday or Wednesday of that week, the forecast changed massively. Massive northerly wind was coming in, big pressure drop. Absolute, I think it was a northeasterly wind, which is absolutely prime conditions for that point. I can remember ringing one of my other mates, Tom, in the week, and I was just like, mate, I've dropped a clanger here. I know I have, but it was too late now. I'd already said to my mate, come and, you know. Anyway, cut a long story short, he dropped in the Pines that weekend. He fished different spots to what I'd baited. But he caught the scarred linear
Did he?
and the chocolate mirror that weekend.
Well, that did cheer him up a little bit then,
It did cheer him up. And to be honest, I was so pleased for him because he'd fished that lake for quite a few years. And, that was job done for him as such. They were at summer weights, they weren't the biggest. And ultimately, actually did me a favour in hindsight because I went on to catch that scarred linear in the middle of November. That was quite an interesting capture, that, because the lake's relatively deep. It goes down to 40 foot in places. And I'd never fished depths like that.
Wow.
The majority of the summer, I'd fish around the marginal shelf, 8-9 foot. That's where I was catching them from. As the autumn wore on, September came, I sort of dropped down to 16s, then into 20s. And then I fished that 20 foot for a while. I was still catching them. And I was almost chasing them down the depths. But once they went beyond that sort of 22 foot depth and they started showing out in the middle, I was a little bit unsure. I can remember I'd seen them for a couple of weekends. Nothing had happened on my sort of baited spot in sort of 20 odd foot. It'd been very quiet, but they were showing right out in the middle and I knew it was 35 foot plus. So that week I actually Googled carp feeding in deep water, just to sort of, try and build up a bit of confidence. I was just reading what they were saying on forums, etc., on the internet regarding, and basically the general consensus was, if they're there, fish for them, they'll feed where, that's their home at the end of the day. So I can remember I went down there that Thursday because I had the Friday off. So I've gone down there that Thursday and I've got this plan in my mind. I'm going to take them, I'm towing them out to the middle and I'm going to drop them in that deep water. You could use boats, but obviously it's pitch black. I was going down there on my own. It was a quiet lake, so I was turning up on a Thursday. I'd have the lake to myself, and I say dinghy, but it was like it wasn't really a dinghy. It was a hard bottom boat, but it was sort of like a dinghy. It was called a dabbler. This boat I was using, it was like a little bathtub. But I can remember I got in the dabbler and rode out to the middle in the pitch black, and I can still remember just lowering these pop-ups right down into the inky depths, spread a handful of baits around them, and took them back to the bank, and that was it. I thought, right, let's see what happens. Did that night, very quiet, not a lot happened in the morning. Didn't see anything show in the morning out in the middle, but I saw 2 over on the far bank. I was in a swim called the Oak, and I saw 2 on the far bank showing a swim called the Pines. Close in the corner over what I knew was about 16 foot. So obviously I'm still sort of struggling with confidence in this deep water a bit. So I've seen these 2 shows and the morning's wore on and I thought, I need to move over there. I'm going to go and fish for them. I've seen nothing out in the middle. I'm fishing ridiculous depths. I'm going to go and fish over there in a bit more, And what I actually did was probably, I don't know, you might call it stupid or what, but by now, one of my mates, Damo, had turned up. He was the only other lad on the lake, and he was 2 swims up from me, setting up in Winter Point. So what I did, don't know why, but I decided to pack all my kit away, bar the rods, and load it into the boat, row across to the other side of the lake, leaving the rods out. I mean, it's a quiet lake. My mate was 2 swims up. So I've put all the kit in the boat, rowed straight across the middle of the lake, straight across where I'm fishing in the middle, albeit 35, 40 foot below me. Set my kit up in the pines. I can remember I even made myself a bit of breakfast, a bit of porridge because I was hungry. So I've sat around there, made myself a bit of breakfast in the pines. Thought, right, best go and reel my rods in. So I've left the boat there because I was just going to literally go and reel the rods in, grab my net and walk back round the lake with them. I know it sounds terrible, but my mate was 2 swims up, and it was a quiet lake, and we did have it to ourselves. So anyway, I've walked back round slowly, no rush, ambled into my mate Damo's swim, had a chat with him for 5 minutes, and I've walked out of his swim, and I'm literally halfway between his swim and the oak, and I can remember just hearing a couple of bleeps. From a Neville, and I thought, hang on. And then just as I'm sort of contemplating it, that was my Neville, it's just, the right hand rod just melted off. I didn't know it was the right hand rod at the time. As I run along the bank and looked, I could see it was the right hand rod, just peed, tip was bent over. I mean, I'm right out in the pond, 150 yards out in the pond, but I was using mono at the time. It sort of beds down in that deep water, and it said the tip's bending over. And anyway, yeah. Cut a long story short again. I do a lot of that. But I got it in the net, and it was the bloody scarred linear.
Wow.
Like the fish that had brought me to that lake. That was the one. In my mind, although there was bigger fish in that lake, that scarred linear is what had brought me here. And it was my first bite from that 35 foot. If it would have been minutes later, my whole autumn would have been completely different. Because as it happens, I've gone back to the pines, I packed my kit up, set back up in the oak, and from then, that was mid-November until when I caught the big one, I caught pretty consistently then throughout the autumn. It was the best autumn's fishing I've ever had.
Wow.
They'd never been, even though they'd never been fished for out there.
Hadn't they?
And
there was definitely, it was just pure depth from being in the middle of the lake.
Yeah,
there was nothing else out there.
What was interesting is when I lowered the rigs down there, I had no marker out there in the middle, and obviously I was going out there in the dark, but what I used to do, I'd have points of reference, trees on each bank. So once I was out in the middle, I was like, right, that's that tree, that's that tree, and that. So I sort of knew I wasn't fishing super accurate. I just roughly fish 3 rods in what is probably a tennis court size area in the middle, spread a few baits around them. I can't really remember where I was going with that.
What, and you just continued to catch in the same part of the lake?
Yeah, just continued to catch. As I say, it just hadn't. That was what I was.
So do you think it was just establishing bait there?
Yeah, well, that was what I was going to say. Sorry, when I dropped the rig down, the 5-ounce lead from the boat for the first time, I was amazed at how hard it hit the bottom. Now this Mia is thousands of years old. It was formed in the Ice Age. So when I dropped that lead down in 35, 40 foot of water and it went donk, I thought, hang on, there's not 5,000 years worth of silt built up down there. Something's been going on down there, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Just carried on fishing that zone. Like I say, no real accuracy, just sort of tennis court sized area. What I did as well, because I had no outboard and I had my little bathtub dinghy, my dabbler. It wasn't actually mine. It was on the lake. I just borrowed it, but it was. Because I was rowing the rigs out there, and obviously in the autumn you get a lot of winds, I'd actually alternate between 2 swims, the pines and the oak. They were opposite each other on the lake, but they both commanded the middle body, and I'd always fish the swim which the wind was blowing into, because by then I'd row against the wind out to the middle, and then I'd lower my rig, and the wind is naturally taking you back to the bank then. If you're trying to row back against the wind with one hand while trailing a rod behind you as well, it was incredibly hard work. So I'd actually move swims just depending on which way the wind was blowing, but still fish that same zone in the middle. And it did, when December came, it did slow down.
Would you always favour those, if you can find those really, really hard areas amongst all that silt?
Yeah, well,
is that kind of a rule for you?
Well, yeah, I mean, like I say, that kind of depth, with that kind of depth in a lake of that age, if it's firm in that depth, surely something's fed there, you know.
They do, but sometimes you think they fed there, but are they still feeding on those spots?
Yeah.
So have they fed there and left it, or are they?
It was the right time of the, you know, in hindsight, it was the perfect time of year. It was mid-November, and they just migrated out to the middle. They were in that deepest part of the lake. There was actually a slight shelf where I was fishing. It sort of gradually, one bank, the Pines bank, it went instantly down to 30 foot, 2 rod lengths off the margin. Then it went down to sort of 40, and then it sort of gradually come up to sort of, there was a bit of a shelf in the middle of the lake that sort of come up from 40 up to 35, and then it would gradually increase all the way to the other bank. And it seemed to be on this sort of shelf where it dropped from 35 down to sort of 40. That seemed to sort of be, I mean, I never had an echo sounder or anything. I'm just sort of going by what it felt like with a lead on the end of the rod sort of thing. I do know it is those kind of depths because I know lads that have fished it since with echo sounders, and they've sort of told me what the exact depths are.
So that's changed your opinion on depths now. Then.
I wouldn't be, if I see fish, you know, especially that time of the year, if you want good consistent autumn fishing, pick a deep lake, because, you know, they will hold the temperature and they will fish late. Without doubt, I had my best autumn's fishing ever on that lake. You know, as I say, it just continued. I caught a lot of the big ones. After that scarred linear, I caught a few 30-pound commons, a couple of smaller mirrors. And then it did sort of slow. I mean, the one I was really after then was the chocolate mirror. This is the biggest mirror in the lake. You know, and that would have pretty much completed it for me. And it hadn't been caught it hadn't been caught since my mate had caught it in the summer. And I was just adamant that it was coming out. And I had this little bit of it had done a winter capture from that end of the lake about 5 or 6 years previously. So in my mind, I was like, it hasn't been caught. It's the biggest fish in the lake. It's been caught in the winter. I've caught all the other good ones from this zone. It is out there. You know, I could catch it from here. So anyway, I've carried on. It got to the beginning of December, and it just died off. It died a death. Nothing was happening. Nothing was showing. The odd little liners I was getting stopped. And then, you start to lose a bit of hope then, don't you? Especially that time of the year. And but anyway, I slogged it out, and I can remember I went down Christmas, and I set up for a 3-nighter in the run up to Christmas. I was going home on Christmas morning, and I'd blanked for a few weeks at this point. But anyway, I've gone down there, got the rigs out in the middle, and the next day, a lad Colin who fished the lake years before had come down, and he was telling me how he'd caught a couple in December on a big mild southwesterly wind up the other end of the lake in a swim called the Caravan. So now it's really playing on my mind. I'm thinking, you know, have these fish moved? Like, I mean, the lake hasn't got an awful lot of winter track. I mean, what these captures I'm talking about are probably the only captures it had done at the time in the winter, you know, but it wasn't a massively prolific lake. But, you know, that was playing on my mind then. I'm thinking, am I down the wrong end of the lake here? Do I need to be up in the Caravan on the end of the wind? Anyway, I sat it out, and I'd love to tell you they started showing and all sorts, but they didn't. I just sort of sat it out, and Christmas morning, it got to about 10 o'clock, and I thought, right, I best start packing away now. You know, going and having Christmas dinner.
Is this normal for you to fish at Christmas Day? It doesn't bother you?
No.
I can't see that it would.
I've fished Christmas morning for about the last 8 years or something now, 9 years. It's my normal Christmas now. I'm just starting to wrap away, and I can remember I was just sat on the edge of the bed picking up the last few bits, and middle rod has I mean, I've got relatively tight lines. You know, I've probably got a 1/4 of an inch drop on the bobbins. As I say, I was fishing mono at the time. And I can remember I just had a bleep, and I've looked up, and I could just see the middle rod bobbin jammed into the rod. And I've just watched it as the tips pulled down. I'm in the pines now, and as I say, it was 30 foot off the tip. So although I'm 150 yards out in the pond, fishing, isn't it? I'm just watching the tip just pull down.
Yeah.
And you know, the minute I picked that rod up, it's the only time I can honestly say that I've ever done this, but I knew what I'd got on the end. Deep down, I knew. I picked that rod up, and it was just this telltale, heavy bream-like fight, which I knew that fish was noted for. And it just come in like a dog on a lead, hugged the bottom all the way in. And it was at the base of the shelf, 2 rod lengths out, in 30 foot of water. So I'm literally stood on the front of the boards and I'm hoisting this fish up from the depths like I'm deep sea tuna fishing, you know. And I can remember it's come up, it's rose to the surface, and he's got this little telltale dark head, big dark shoulders. And
you got a picture of that one, Tope?
There it is.
Yeah, that's the one. Christmas morning.
Do you think you're owed a fish on Christmas morning, Tom? Just because you're there and trying hard.
Yeah, I'll be totally honest.
That's a lovely carp, isn't it?
I've had some good luck on Christmas mornings in the past.
That looks so dark, that one.
They probably just feel sorry for me for being so sad.
It's a nice little reward, isn't it?
Yeah, but no, I was so chuffed to get that on Christmas morning. A couple of my mates, Lee and Tom, they come down and did the
Did they?
They did, yeah, they did. In fact, my mate Tom Pudding, he got in trouble because he's got me. I mean, my mate Lee, he's like me, single, lives at home, got no missus, so he was all right. But my other mate, I think he got in a bit of trouble. But yeah, no, fair play to him. Cheers for coming down and doing the pics. And
yeah, it's good to have some good mates, isn't it, to do that? Yeah.
But that wasn't the end. So I caught that on Christmas morning, absolutely buzzing. You know, I'll never forget that capture. I was so elated to get that on Christmas morning. But there was one more fish in that lake that I'd have really liked to catch. I know you haven't got a picture of this one, but there was one more fish in that lake that I really wanted to catch. And it was a fish called the lung leather. Real old one of the true originals of that lake. Real old sort of snub-nosed mirror. Only a sort of low to mid 30. They call it the lung leather. And to be honest, I didn't even know if it was still in there. It used to be relatively friendly, and at this point it had been about 2.5 years since it had been caught. But if there was one fish I'd like to have caught from that lake, that would have been it. And although I did fish every weekend after that, nothing else happened. Obviously, I think once sort of you get past that Christmas period, generally, you know, the lake's cooled right down, and all of a sudden then them depths lose their appeal. All of a sudden the shallows then start to become appealing. And I'd sort of fished around, and the last weekend of my ticket, I'd already decided I was dropping my ticket. I'd caught everything I'd wanted to catch from that lake and more. Well, I say everything. There was one more. And I'd already decided I was dropping my ticket. And the last trip, in fact, my last evening on the lake, I was set up in a swim called the Carp. Right up the far end, it's the shallowest swim on the lake. And my right-hand rod was fished onto this little sandy plateau that's about 3 foot deep off the pads down to the right. Probably one of the shallowest spots in the lake. A spot that, although I'd seen nothing there, as I say, it gets all the sunshine, that bank does. It's the shallowest end, and a mate of mine had caught one really early, March time, from there a couple of years previously. So it had a bit of history, this area. And on my very last evening on the lake, I'd sat there, I'd seen nothing. I'd just been sat in there just because it felt like the best area to be in. And I had a little liner on the right-hand rod. I can remember it just went, just lifted, you know, half an inch. Bear in mind, it's only just down the margin to my right on this little plateau. I thought, hang on, that was something. And at that moment, 2 cars have pulled up behind my swim. There's a gravel track behind the swim. And I'm right on this gravel track. And it's like a few of my mates. And I thought, oh, God, you know when you think this is I had a feeling, you know, they were close after that little liner. So I've literally stood up and sort of walked to the back of the swim to sort of usher my mates back, just. And at that moment, right-hand rod just melted off. And after a savage battle, the lung bloody leather rolled into the net. Oh, literally my last ever evening on the lake.
Awesome, yeah.
So I've got quite fond memories of that lake.
We'll put a picture of that up, actually.
The lake that kept on giving, that was.
But it's interesting as well, Tom, what you're saying about, favouring a lake that's got extreme depths as well can actually make fishing a bit easier, can't it?
Yeah, what with the depths?
Yeah, like you say, once if you've got 40 foot of water and then it's starting to cool, it's like they're not going to be in a rush to get back there, are they?
In hindsight, it was amazing. It's funny really because, as I say, that middle zone in the autumn, what I did that autumn on that lake had never been done before, and weirdly, it's been tried quite a lot since, and it's never. I think the problem is now multiple people try it from different angles. There's different bits of bait going. I don't know.
Are those hard areas still there though? Or
I don't know. I only did that 1 year on the lake, and I've never been back since.
So you might have just come across that hard area. And
I don't know. I don't know. I mean, if I went back there, I'd definitely be fishing that middle come October, November. But yeah, it's the same. The same has never happened again. It's never been repeated. Maybe they just felt safe out there because nobody had ever done that. I don't know, but yeah,
you've just got the knack, Tom, haven't you?
Just lucky. But that was an incredible autumn sort of winter's fishing.
Yeah, lovely carp in there. So I said to you before, early this year, I know Darryl mentioned you in our podcast, but up until that point, I hadn't really heard your name mentioned. And then Damo says to me, "Have you listened to these Tom Stokes podcasts?" And it was like, no. And he said, they are really, really good. And that was the first time I sort of come across, you've got the ability to be able to tell a story pretty well, haven't you? Have you got...
Well, so people say.
What do you think? I mean, because you obviously pay quite a lot of attention to detail, don't you? And that probably shows in your carp fishing as well.
Yeah, I suppose I do, yeah.
Yeah. I was gutted. I thought, oh, God, we wanted to have the premiere on that. And
but no, it's quite a funny one because obviously, that it was Dom, lovely chap, asked me to do them podcasts, and he sort of messaged me. And at first, I thought, is this something I really want to do? And I sort of looked at his page, and he had about 800 or 900 followers, and I thought, I'll do it. He's a nice chap, and no one's probably going to listen to him anyway. Well, how wrong was I? It seems like bloody everybody listened to him.
Everyone was listening.
They seem to be quite well received. So
it was doing my head in. I was walking down the corridor and people say, "Have you listened to this Tom Stokes podcast?" And it's like, God, no. I mean, fair play to him for obviously getting you on the show. But I mean, it was just your attention to detail is unbelievable. And I think one day when you might choose to write a book or something, I mean, you tell a story as if it's being read from a book, and I mean that's a good quality to have, isn't it? Have you always been like that then, Tom?
I don't know.
Been able to.
Yeah.
Had you ever listened to yourself talking like that previously?
No. I mean, I still haven't really listened to myself talk. I'll be honest, I still haven't listened to those podcasts because it's
a bit different when it's yourself.
Yeah,
though, isn't it?
It's strange when you listen to yourself. I just can't help but cringe at my own voice.
Well, I cringe at looking at myself on these. So like
I'll just take everybody's word for it. If everybody enjoys it, great.
Yeah, but no, they were very good, and it's I think that it's probably helped you establish yourself a little bit in the big fish fraternity as well. I mean,
yeah.
Have you noticed a change since you started doing that stuff? And
definitely. Yeah,
because I think there's a bit of romance with carp fishing that people like. They like people like yourself and Terry who they're out there really, really doing it, but they can relive the story back as well. I mean, it's the whole package, isn't it?
I suppose. Yeah, it is. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's quite humbling to be put in the same sentence as Terry.
I think. I mean, without being patronising, I definitely see there's a similarity between the type of fishing you do and the way you tell a story for sure. And I think Terry's obviously a very successful angler, but part of his appeal as well is the fact that he's been able to tell those stories so well as well. So and obviously being part of the exclusive Burghfield Common Club as well.
Yeah.
How many times has that been caught now, Tom?
14 now.
Yeah.
Obviously it recently came out. Greg had it. Was it about a month ago now? And that would have been the 14th capture. So yeah, not a lot really. I think the first capture was 93 maybe. I might be wrong there. Somebody's probably sat there going, no, it's this year, but I'm sure it's about 93. So when you think, that there's been a lot of angling pressure on that lake by a lot of good anglers in that time frame. And it's only done 14. It's like one every 2 years, isn't it?
It's mental, isn't it? We will talk about the Burghfield Common a little bit later because it's like
I don't mind talking about the Burghfield.
It's a fascinating fish to talk about, isn't it?
It is.
Have you got? I mean, but you've obviously got a lot of focus. Are you focused? And what about being competitive as well? Because being on those sort of lakes, there is.
Well, obviously, there's a massive.
But you seem to be able to do it in a nice way.
Yeah. It's it is competitive, but at the same time, you've still got to be happy for people when they catch. That's the problem with this. There's one fish in a lake a lot of the time that everybody wants to catch. It might get caught 4 times a year. In the case of the Burghfield Common, it might get caught once every 2 years. And there's no point in being bitter when people, have caught. You just got to carry on.
I mean, it's a lesson as well. When someone catches a fish as well, isn't it? It's you might not have caught it, but you can still use it to your
exactly. But yeah, there's obviously a certain amount of competitiveness, without doubt. We all want to catch them, don't we?
Yeah.
But it's how you go about it, isn't it? There's no need to be bitter when it doesn't go your way or whatever.
No, you've got to enjoy it. You've got to enjoy it, and I think those people sort of die away. The ones that are a little bit, jealous and can't enjoy other people's success as well. It's not great, is it?
No.
But you seem to sort of attract people around you. You seem to get on with everybody on the lakes.
Yeah, well, that's it. I do. I like to get on with everybody. It pays to get on with everybody. Makes life a lot easier if you get on with everybody. Yeah. No,
it does. What about sort of so you as a person? So working at the moment, you've got your same 9 till 5 job at the moment. So
indeed,
that's the other thing with your fishing. You are not a full-time angler.
No,
it's like,
as much as I wish I was.
Yeah.
But no, I do. I work at 9 till 5. I have done since I was 17. When I left school, I did go to college briefly for about 6 months. I went to a college and did fisheries management. Sort of what they do at Sparsholt. But ultimately, it was 2 hours on the bus every day from where I lived to get to this college. 2 separate buses. One bus was sort of an hour. I'd get off the bus, wait for the next bus, 45 minutes on that bus until I got to the college. So that soon became very boring. And ultimately, a lot of my mates were going to work. They were earning a bit of money. And I just wanted to earn a bit of money so I could go fishing. So I did about 6 months at college, and then I fell into this job that I'm doing now. I jacked college in.
Do you not think you had enough interest in that sort of side of it? Would you rather be out just fishing?
I'll be totally honest. I love fishing. Fisheries management's great, and I've got interest in it, but I don't love that as much as I love fishing. And I sort of sacrificed my opportunities in that role, in that career, just to go fishing, really. I mean, there has been times over the last few years I thought, perhaps I should have carried that on or whatever. But as far as my fishing goes, I mean, I fell into this job that I still do now. I deliver furniture. I know it's a 9 till 5, but it is relatively flexible. I can have Mondays and Fridays off sort of at the drop of a hat. I get 20 days a year annual leave, so I'll use all those in the summer to sort of extend my trips at prime time. And my gaffer is pretty flexible in that, if I work over in the week at all, I can have all that time to sort of finish early on a Thursday. And ultimately, he's only delivering furniture, so it's not a job that I've actually had to put any thought into, really. All my thought and focus has just gone into fishing.
But I like what you said last week about, although your job might not be your ideal job, you said the pride and care you still take with doing something like that. You still give it your all when you're at work.
I do. I like to give 100%. I mean, as I say, I deliver furniture, which you probably think, well, how do you? But it's top end furniture. And I just like to do the best job I can. I mean, I've even been known to sort of vacuum old ladies' front rooms after we've taken their old suite out before we put the new. If it's dirty under an old bed or under an old sofa, I'm not going to leave it like that. I'll vacuum it for her. Those little things that ultimately they build up the bigger picture, don't they?
Yeah.
And I like to do as good a job as possible in whatever I do. Yeah, really.
I like that, Tom. I think that says a lot about you as a person.
I wouldn't say I hate the job. It's but it's not like my I never had any ambitions to deliver furniture. I just fell in, but I do it and I do it the best I can. Same sort of goes for fishing. I put 110% in.
Well, going to work, you are going to spend, a reasonable time during the week at work, so you might as well try and make the most of it. So
that's it.
Yeah. And have you always had a passion for other things away from carp fishing, or is it?
No, I'm going to sound like a right bore now, probably, but no. You know, when I was younger, I used to do it, you know, ride my bike and that a bit, but really, since fishing has always been the love of my life. You know, it is my life. You know, if I only had fishing, I'd be a happy man, sort of thing. Yeah. All my focus and attention really goes into fishing. You know.
It's like reading the old Terry Hearn books as well, wasn't it? You could see, like, you know, right from the start that was everything.
That's it.
Do you think you would carry on like that? I mean, do you not think you get to a certain age and think, do you know what? Maybe I'll get a girlfriend or settle down or.
Well, I have thought about that over the years. I mean, I've had girlfriends in the past, a long time ago. But once carp fishing really took over, when I got into my sort of late teens, 18, 19, you know, when you're fishing, especially the way I fish, how I have to fish weekends, I don't know, it takes so much focus, and you know, I don't know, so much time, yeah.
Yeah, I know, but I think it says a lot for people that are listening and watching this, what it actually takes to, you know, to be successful on these lakes. You know, I mean, it's easy to look at that and think, you know, maybe I could do that, but it's what you're having to, you know, set aside to be able to do that. And
you sacrifice a lot. I mean, I'm at a point in my life now. A lot of my mates will probably listen to this and laugh, but a lot of my mates don't even invite me places now, you know, if they're getting married or whatever, because they just know that I'm likely to not come. You know, consistency is the key with carp fishing now, I think, especially big carp fishing, big low stock lakes. Consistency is the key. It's no good going 2 weeks, having 2 weeks off. You know, you have 1 week off and you can come back and it's a completely different lake. Especially in the summer months, you know, baiting, and again, consistency is key. You know, that's not going to work. It's not like I'm local enough to just nip down and put a bit of bait in. I have to drive the 120 miles to the lake to put my bait in, so I might as well fish. So, you know, I can't miss weekends. That's why I'm, as I say, with this Farnham Flint at the minute, it's been quite relaxed because I'm not in that kind of mindset where I'm sort of flat out campaign fishing, shall we say.
We were looking at some pictures of some French fish as well and fishing overseas and stuff. But, you know, at the moment, your fishing's so intense.
You can never say never. I mean, it's all about time and just fishing. The way I fish in the UK, you know, I've sort of got myself into a routine that suits me and catches them, if you know what I mean. I sort of May till October, I have the Fridays off, and I've got that sort of 3-night routine, 3 nights of fishing. So I'll go fishing for 3 nights. I'll come back. I've got 4 nights away from the lake. I generally bait really heavy on the Sunday. Throughout the week, I'm preparing my bait. Those 4 nights that I'm at home actually go really quickly when you're you know, cooking bait, etc. Back down on the Thursday, back on the baited zones or whatever. I mean, obviously that's only in the summer. But yeah, I don't know. It's just a good routine that I've got into. Do
you think that's obviously a model that you can replicate on?
Yeah, I've fished like that for the last 10 years, pretty much. And as I say, caught pretty much. You know, it works for me. I've caught pretty much everything I've fished for, doing it like that. Getting there on a Thursday, fishing till a Sunday, baiting heavy on the Sunday. Go home for 4 days. I think doing it like that as well. I mean, obviously springs are different. You aren't baiting in the springs as such. You're more so chasing around, looking for opportunities. But yeah, I think that kind of tactic has worked really well for me, because that heavy baiting on a Sunday and then I'm completely leaving it. I mean, this is different on a busy lake because chances are someone's going to fish in there. But if it's not so busy, the fish have got all that 4 days of the week to feed happily on your heavily baited zone.
When you say heavily as well, how much bait would you be putting in on a Sunday?
It depends, but this time of year, I would happily put out 2 20-litre buckets of seed, five kilos or more of boilies, a jar of tigers, it depends.
But you put a lot of emphasis on that.
It's got to be in the right place. Though.
Right.
You can't just chuck that anywhere and then all this. But that it's all, you build up to that, don't you? Throughout the year, from the spring, you'll build up. You're always watching what's going on. You're chasing around the pond. You're watching what the weed's doing, where the weed's growing. And then generally, come sort of July time, end of June, July, I'm looking for somewhere to put bait in because that plays it into my hands then. If I can get that bait somewhere that they want it, and all I've got to do is turn up on a Thursday and put my rigs there, and by baiting it heavy every Sunday,
So summer onwards then, what people would see you fishing similar areas pretty much?
Yeah.
And then you rely on the respect of other anglers to leave you to it a little bit.
Yeah, I do, but obviously, you do rely on... Look, I have been quite lucky, but at the same time, if you keep your spots quite small, and not only has someone got to go in your swim, they've then got to try and find your spots. I mean, the spots I was baiting over Burghfield in speedboat, for example, they were mega range. Well, I say mega range, not mega range in today's terms, but they were sort of 110, 120. One was 110, one was 130 yards. But the way I baited them, either with a bait boat or a dinghy, meant I kept those spots tight. Now, for somebody to go into that swim and find those spots, they'd have been doing well, at that kind of range.
How long would it have taken you to find a spot like that in the first place?
Well, it depends. Generally, those spots on speedboat were slightly different in that they were spots that I knew had sort of done areas roughly where I knew had done bites in the past, and I sort of went out there in the middle of the night to begin with in a dinghy, had a good prod around it. Speedboat was a passing swim. Fish would pass through there every single day of the summer, warmer months to get to these snags down the channel, down this sort of dead channel, the bailiff's channel, real deep channel, full of snags. No one can fish in there. No one could fish in there. They used to get in there every day. So basically, I was baiting, knowing fish would be passing. But generally, on a spot like Engie, for example, the spot I ended up catching the baby black from, that was from a show. I'd seen one show, again, at sort of 110 yards. Not only had it showed there, I then watched it bubble up, like feed there for sort of 10 minutes afterwards, and I thought, well, that'll do. I've actually seen one feed there. It's
That's a bit similar to Oz as well, wasn't it? Did Oz see it as well?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure. I think I saw him showing, baited a zone heavy, went away on holiday for 2 weeks, came back, fished on the point, because before he went on holiday, he'd caught one off the point. While he was sat on the point, he seen this big black mirror show down the far end of the lake and thought, that ain't far off where I put that bait a couple of weeks ago. So he's gone round there, put the rig out there that night. Next morning, it was all over.
See what I mean, Tove? He's got an unbelievable memory. He remembers other people's fishing as much as well as his own. It's really impressive. Right, I said when I listened to your podcast, I messaged you to say I really, really like those podcasts, and I said, when you catch the baby black, come and do a podcast with us. Yeah. So I wasn't sure how long that would take, and it didn't really seem to take very long.
No, it didn't. I got quite lucky there as well, because that lake, it's always been busy, Englefield, especially the last few years, especially in the springs. But this year it has been intense, with furlough, and whatever. Plus, the lakes have just got they're a lot more well known now, aren't they? It's, fish is a lot bigger. It did 49 pound last autumn, so now I think a lot of people are there expecting a 50 pounder. I just caught it in time, because the way I angled that lake, like going onto the baiting, etc., I think I'd be struggling to do that now.
Yeah, I just had to throw that up.
Yeah, we're looking at a picture of the baby black.
Oh yeah.
No, it is one of the it is one of the sort of most well-known carp in the country at the moment. In some respects, it's being fished for by some pretty good anglers, isn't it?
It has.
So, was that always the progression for you? So it's like the set, isn't it? I mean, there is a.
The goal was never I never set out to catch the set. It's just how it happened. Obviously, I fished Pingewood first, caught a lot of them, didn't catch the brute. Went and fished that mere. While I was on that mere, I sort of got offered a Burghfield ticket, which I couldn't refuse, even though at the time I thought it was a bit out of my league, but I still thought I've got to take this ticket. I might never get offered it again. Did a couple of years on Burghfield, and it was sort of the first 18 months, and basically I had a bit of a headache the second year. A lot of things went wrong. I didn't catch a lot. It was a nightmare year, really. I won't go into too much detail, but it was almost like something was telling me in the back of my mind. I always had this niggling thing to go back and catch the brute. And it was always like something was telling me that you need to leave this lake and go and catch the brute. Anyway, I had an absolute disaster over Burghfield that spring. The final nail in the coffin was when late one evening, 10 o'clock, I was casting my rods out last thing to get the range. You couldn't use bait boats at the time. So I was casting my rods out last thing on the evening to get the range. I cracked off, lost the rod tip. I didn't lose it. It went 40 yards out into the lake and I had to swim out and bloody get it.
I've done that as well, Tom.
In 12 foot of bloody water.
Yeah, it's not easy.
And I got back to the bank and I just slung everything in the van, and I just knew at that moment that I was done on that lake for that sort of spring. And I instantly knew where I was going. There and then I brought my Pingewood ticket. The following week, I turned up on a Thursday. I sort of built up, I had a plan in my mind now on how I was going to catch the brute. I caught a lot of fish from Pingewood when I went there originally, those first two sort of springs I fished it. But in the 2 or 3 years I'd been gone, while I'd been fishing elsewhere, because I had a lot of mates fishing the lake, I'd sort of worked out a plan on how I was going to catch the brute. Anyway, I went back on there that summer, went on there the start of July, got myself into Motorway Point eventually. I don't just pick a swim and start baiting it. There's always certain factors. I have a few trips, work out who's fishing where. You don't want to be baiting a swim that someone else is already doing bits in. But the lake was relatively quiet that year, and I started baiting Motorway Point. I sort of had this plan in my mind that I was just going to bait the middle. Bit different angling wise to what I'd ever done before, because I'd always been one to chase them round, but sometimes that ain't the way to catch the big uns. Sometimes, fish like the brute, baby black is another one. They're bait fish, and chasing them around the pond, although they can get caught like that, it's not the one. But anyway, I got this game plan that I was going to bait the point. It was a bit frustrating. I can remember certain weeks watching them show over the other side in the ladders, etc. and thinking, I should be out. But I was just like, no, you've got to stick to your plan. And yeah, I sort of given myself 8 weeks to catch it, because I wanted to be back on Burghfield by the start of September. I didn't start till the beginning of July. I wanted to be back on Burghfield for the start of September, like I say. And yeah, 7 weeks in, on the 7th weekend, on the Sunday morning, I caught it.
I like the story with that as well. There's always a story with your captures, Tom. What was it? Did you have a fly in your... you were ill that weekend, weren't you? Did you say...
Yeah, when I caught the brute. I was really ill. I got there on the Thursday and got the rods out, and I got the bait out. I could sort of tell. You can tell when you're coming. You could feel it in your throat.
Yeah, sore throat. Yeah.
Anyway, I got all my bait out, got my rods out, and I woke up on the Friday morning feeling like death. Never have I felt quite so ill on the bank. Luckily, it was midsummer, so it wasn't cold. And
you didn't think, right, I'm going to pack up and go home now because I'm ill?
Nah. I'll tell you another story about me. When we get onto Englefield, I'll tell you another story about being ill on the bank in a bit. But yeah, now I didn't think I was... If I'm going to lie in bed, I might as well lie in bed at the lake, and that's the way I look at it. So anyway, I lay there on Motorway Point for 2 days. Not a lot was happening. I can remember, like I was convinced that I'd caught a few off this spot, but it had gone quiet for a few weeks, and I was convinced that they were still coming in and feeding, but I wasn't catching them. I was fishing boilies over boilies. And that trip, I thought, I need to change something here. So I bought a bucket of emp down, still loads of boilies, and a few tigers, and one rod I put on a tiger nut, a balanced tiger nut. And I think on the second morning, I woke up to a bream bite on the tiger nut. And I can remember I reeled it in, feeling like death. And the flipping hook point was bent over. bird. I'd sharpened it and it sort of burred out. And I literally pushed the hook on the back of the scissors, I think it was.
Not something you'd normally do.
Not something I'd known. I am so fussy about hook points. Not so much these. I am fussy about hook points. Back then, I was massively into hook sharpening. Now I'm the opposite end of the scale. I just like to find the best one in the packet. But any of my mates will tell you how fussy I am about hook points. You've got to be, really, haven't you? And but that just shows how ill I was. I've just looked at this hook, bent the hook back, tested it. I thought, that's banging sharp. Wrapped it up, whacked it back out there, left it again. Next morning, bream bite again on that rod. And hook point was fine, wrapped it up, chucked it back out there. This is about 6 a.m. I can remember one of my mates had walked round and he stood at the back of my swim as I cast that rod. I could just remember it hitting the cliff, getting the drop, and I looked back at it, I was like, that is the one. And 7:45 that morning, I had a bite on that rod. Instantly weirded me up. Just gave it the absolute butt of the rod. Slowly walking back up the swim, got it moving. Dragged a car-sized weed bed all the way in from sort of 80, 90 yards out in the pond. And off motorway point, not only is pins gin clear, motorway point drops down to about 12 foot, straight in front of the swim. So you've got real deep, clear water in front of you. And as this big car-sized weed bed just come across the deep water in front of me, I can remember just seeing, like, the brute had a bit of a bad tail at the time. It was a bit sore on its bottom lobe. It's got quite a reddy, orangey tail anyway. But I knew I could just see its tail hanging out the bottom of the weed bed. It was just like wedged in there, and just below the weed, through the depths of the water, I could just see its tail hanging out the bottom. And I got, with the momentum of the weed coming towards me, as it got close enough, I just sort of chucked the rod down, got both arms of the net, and just scooped the whole lot up, knowing that the brute was in the bottom of it. And that was it. Worth staying there for.
I mean, that's a lesson, isn't it? Yeah. If you're on the lake and you're feeling sick, well, it might feel sorry for you.
Well, yeah, I mean, as I say, I live at home with my dad, and all I'd be doing is going home to lie in bed and feel sorry for myself. I might as well lie in bed and feel sorry for myself with the bloody rods out. That's my theory.
You felt a bit better after that, I bet, as well.
I did actually, yeah.
But I mean, even with the brute, I mean, you were catching. It sounded like you caught a lot of fish out of Pingewood as well. But I mean, it was one of the last. Was it the last fish you ended up catching? Did you fish it after that?
Yeah, that was the last fish.
So that was the very last fish you caught.
It was funny actually, because, as I say, prior to the brute, I'd not caught anything off that spot for about 3 weeks. Although I'd been consistently baiting it, fishing it 3 nights a week. I'd caught a few off there to begin with. Anyway, I've caught the brute, got it in the net, buzzing, rang the boys. Wound my other rod in off the spot. That's it, job done. And I tell you what, every fish in the bloody lake turned up on that spot then. And we were all sat there and they were jumping like dolphins, bubbling up. It's like they knew. It's like they knew. Brute's been caught, rods are out the water, let's feed. And it was a crazy sight, like, just to see.
Did that one get caught with other fish in multiple captures very often? Or was it do you think it was a loner then?
It was. It did get caught. No, I mean, Pinge is quite a tricky lake to get multiple hits of fish. Hits of fish didn't really happen. If you did a stint 3 or 4 nights, you might get one a morning, sort of thing. I can't really remember in my time anybody. I mean, it was a relatively low stock lake, incredibly pressured, quite small. You know, once one gets caught, they sort of did the off. You know, it did occasionally come out with other fish. It was quite. The second biggest mirror in the pond, Pecks, they sort of came up. But no, I'd say it was a bit of a loner. It could, a lot of the times it would come out on its own as a random bite. Sometimes people caught one before it, but yeah.
Sort of gave the game away a little bit at the end, didn't it? By seeing all those fish on the spot after you caught it.
Yeah,
It's like, oh, right, this is what's going on.
Yeah.
You know.
It was funny. It was, like I say, there was a load of us there. Obviously, Brute's in the net. We were all there, gathered round, ready to do the pictures. And they were literally just like dolphins, one after another on the spot. Big sheets of fish. I'd sat in that swim for 6 weeks and seen nothing like that out there. It's like they knew those rigs were out.
You sold that story well, and that spot as well. What was it, about 80 yards out? Did you say? And you'd wake up in the morning and you'd see a bit of activity over the. I mean, it's just like, God, I want to go fishing.
Yeah, that is the best. You know, when you get to that point, there is no better feeling in fishing when you've sort of got to that point where you've got a spot, you've got it baited, your rigs are on it, and you just know, everything's cock on and all you've got to do is reel them in. It's a very rare thing in carp fishing, but when it does happen, it is... it's pretty sweet.
It's great. and I mean, and the brew was the first one in the set, and it kind of went on for. So go to Englefield, because we haven't heard anything about this.
So Englefield, right? Well, Englefield, I mean, when I first started, like I say, I never set out to catch the set. That was what I'm going to say about the brute as well. The year after that, it died. It went rapid, so it was almost like I caught that just in time. Went back to Burghfield, and that following year on Burghfield, I actually did really well. Went back with a different mindset. Started baiting a few. I'd learnt a lot about the lake as well by then. Obviously, it was now my third season, and I had a really good year. But yeah, while I was on Burghfield, obviously the baby black comes to mind. A couple of my mates had, I never set out to catch it originally, but obviously as time went on, a few of my mates had caught it. It got bigger, and once I'd caught the common, it just seemed the obvious place to go to. I mean, I've got a lot of friends in Reading, so it was somewhere I could instantly drop onto, but still be in that circle of friends. I wasn't completely leaving the area, and obviously it is a mega fish. So I've caught the common, and I didn't fish for the first 2 weeks tell a lie. I caught the common, didn't fish the rest of that weekend, we just partied. The following weekend, I didn't fish. I just went down there and sort of walked Tengi. We had a few beers both nights, as you do, sort of a second celebratory weekend. But the third weekend after the common, that is when I set out on Englefield. Now, I went there and I already had this sort of plan in my mind how I was going to catch the baby black. It's a bait fish, and I just thought, right, I just need to find a zone like we've been talking about before. I just need to find a zone they like, bait heavy, and I'll catch this fish. I honestly thought to begin with that I could catch that fish quick. So I've gone on there. First trip was in a swim called the Blocks, which is right down the bottom end of the lake. I can remember I turned up there on a Friday for my first trip, and compared to what it is now, I mean, it was the height of summer, the algae was starting to come in, the lake was going green, and I think I can only remember one other bloke being on the lake on a Friday afternoon. I think he was on the point. I can't remember there being anybody else along that whole road bank, so I've sort of looked around all evening just to see if I see anything. Didn't see anything, so I thought, right, I'll start in the Blocks. Blocks sort of commands the bottom end of the lake, the shallower end, an area of the lake that I sort of thought there might be a few about that time of the year, just going by like what my mates had done on there in years previously, like the few bits I did know about that lake. So I set up in there, did the night, gives you a good view of the lake, and nothing happened. And I can remember the next morning was quiet to begin with, and then about 7:30, 8 o'clock, I put the waders on, stood out a bit in the lake to give me a better view down the pond, and I just clocked them showing right up the other end. I saw one, then another, then another. I thought, bloody hell, I'm down the wrong end of the lake here. So I've wound the rods in quick, left them there, run along the bank. I mean, we're talking 500, 600 yards here, to basically try and pinpoint where these fish were from a swim further up the bank. And I've gone all the way back up the bank, and I've ended up in a swim that I didn't know the name of at the time, but I've since come to know it as, or we've since come to name it as, the 4-boy. A swim that had no history, in regards to what I knew of the lake and my mates that had fished it, caught it, this swim had no history, but this is where they were showing. Out in front of there at about 120 to 150. Anyway, I've stood there and watched them for a bit, and in my mind I'm already thinking this is where I need to be. There was no rush because there was nobody else there. I mean, it seems crazy now. People will be listening to this now that I'm probably sat on the lake thinking, oh my God, surrounded by 20 other blokes. But there was nobody there. So I've sort of watched them for a bit, and I thought, right, I best go and get the kit. By now, the morning's gone on a bit. Sun's up. obviously it was the heat wave that year when it was red hot. Even now we're at the end of the July, we're still in the midst of that heat wave. It's still red hot. So by now it's about 11 o'clock in the morning, and I've started strolling back down the bank towards my kit. And I've just as I'm walking past the bomb swims, I've just clocked this fish bow waving along the bank. And I've followed it along the bank, and I've walked into a swim called the Shepherd's Pie. And I know there's a really shallow bar about 10 yards out in front of the Shepherd's Pie. Again, just from what I knew about the lake from listening to others. And this fish has come in and dropped down on the bar and started feeding. Now, it was that shallow, its tail was literally wafting out the water. Big fizzies of bubbles coming up round its head. And the more I've watched this fish, the bigger it's got. And I'm looking at this fish, massive long fish, big black tail sort of thing. I'm thinking, that's one of two fish, that is. It's either the baby black or the lungfish. The lungfish is a few pounds, well, at the minute it's about 43, so it's a few pounds smaller than the black, but very similar fish, similar length, just not quite as filled out. And I thought, that's got to be one of these two fish. So anyway, I've watched it feeding. And in the end I thought, I've got to go and get the rods. Because there's an opportunity here. I mean, it's ripping it on top of the bar. So I've sprinted all the way back down to the blocks, grabbed the kit, chucked it all on the barra, run back up, and this fish is still there, milling around on the bar, as it's sort of moving around, the water's rocking, and it sort of rose off the spot and then just drifted off to the right, back in the direction of the 4-boy swim where I'd walked from. And anyway, I thought, right, now's my chance. The rigs, on the rods, I had bloody chod rigs. Just because it's my first night on the lake, I just dropped it now. I thought, I took 2 choddies out, pink pop-ups, And anyway, I quickly had a quick lead on this bar, and it was covered in that, grey, green, silkweed, quite coarse, but it was like a carpet. And I thought, sod it, I'll flick the chods out, at least them fishing. And I can remember I've waded out, flicked the first rod out onto the bar, and just as I'm sinking the line, out the corner of my eye, to the right, there's blue barrels in Engie, big blue drums that mark the sailing course, and the one with the number 4 painted on, which is just to the right of the 4-boy, was just in my line, just down to the right. I could just see it in the corner of my eye, and out the corner of my eye, I've just clocked this boy, frigging bobbing like something out of bloody Jaws, like a bloody perch bobber. This boy was. And as I've glanced, this massive black mirror has just shuffled out next to the buoy. Now, I'm not saying it was definitely the black, but I'm pretty sure it was the baby black. Shuffled out next to the buoy. This is literally as I'm in the water sinking the line on this chod rig that is now fished exactly on the bar where this fish was ripping off. Anyway, I thought, right, well, I might as well get the other rod out and just put it further along the bar on the line it's coming in. So literally, I've waded out again with a second rig, flicked that there, and literally as I'm sinking the line, I've just clocked this fish coming in again from the right, straight in. It's come across the bar, it's crossed that first rod. I've still got the rod in my hand. I'm still sinking the line on that first rod, the second rod. It's come across the first rig. It's clocked, or whether it clocked the pop off or what, it was something on that bar. It was obviously feeding on. It's dropped down. Tails come out the water again for a split second. The water dropped, and this fish has just bow waved at 100 miles an hour straight out to them. I've sort of looked down at the rod, expecting to see the braid. The braid
wasn't hooked.
No, it wasn't hooked at all. The bow wave did not stop until it was 200 yards out in the middle of the pond.
Really?
Now, whether it was the baby black or not, I don't know, but I certainly came very close to one of them big uns on that first morning.
I wonder what it was that it didn't like.
Probably the pink pop-up sat in a foot and a half. Yeah. But, in hindsight's a wonderful thing in carp fishing, isn't it? Maybe if I'd have had a little, I'll tell you what would have been the one, a little solid bag or something like that.
Yeah.
But,
in hindsight.
But anyway, never mind. That would have been too easy anyway, wouldn't it? So anyway, I sat there in there for the day, even though I knew that was the chance of that fish gone, really. I mean, I just watched it swim 200 yards away. I thought, by now I'm shattered as well. I'd been up early, so I just thought, I'll have a few hours kip in this swim with the rigs on that bar. But in my mind, I was going to move into the 4-boy swim for the night. So I've given it the day in there. It's got to the evening. I've moved into the 4-boy, where they were showing in the morning out long. But now it's quite warm. It's late in the afternoon. And now there's quite a few carp about. Like they're just sort of bow waving up and down the bank. And the line they seem to be taking, this blue 4-boy, was definitely a point of reference for the fish. They all seem to go round this buoy. So rather than fishing that 150 yards out in the pond where the majority of them were showing, I thought, I'm going to fish by that bloody...
Just look at that buoy all the time.
Exactly, I'm going to fish by that. I had a lead around as well, and it was noticeably shallow by this buoy, quite firm. It just felt nice. It was only sort of 60 yards from the bank. And I had been seeing that sort of show, that shuffle next to the buoy, which I was pretty sure was the black. I was just thinking, I'm just going to fish this buoy. So, fished the buoy for the second night. Not a lot happened. I can't really remember if I saw them the next morning or not. But anyway, I had a bit of bait with me, and I thought, I'm going to bait the buoy. So I baited the buoy in the 4-boy. Because we're in July now, so low stock pit, already in my mind. I'm thinking, I need to get some baiting, just so I've got something to come back on to next weekend. So I baited the buoy, and came back the following weekend, got there on the Thursday, thought, right, got a bit of baiting, I've sort of got something going now, so I've had the Friday off to try and make the most of it. Got there on the Thursday, got the rigs out on the buoy, and I actually woke up at about 3:30 in the morning, 4 o'clock, to a liner. And then one showed on the bait on the buoy, then another liner. So I'm like sat next to the rods thinking, this is it. I am having them. I'm rubbing my hands together. As it got light, the action dissipated. They were on me, but it was basically 2 or 3 liners. One showed over me, little tiny bit of bubbling as it got light, and then it all just fizzled out. But still, I thought, this is good. It's first morning on the lake. One thing I did clock that first morning was a fish show at about 90 yards towards the island. One lone fish showed at 90 yards towards the island, which was a lot closer in than everything else I'd been seeing, which was sort of 130s, 140s, 150s. And this not only did this fish show, it then bubbled up for sort of 10, 15 minutes afterwards. It was obviously grubbing about down there. So that night, I decided to fish my third rod out there at 90 yards and the 2 on the barrel. Now, that day, I don't know whether they'd found it previously or what, or whether they literally found it that day, but there was like a pack of 12 mallards, young mallards, and that day, so I've had them liners that morning, them fishers showed, and that day, these mallards turned up, and one dived, then another, and then they just demolished the spot. Like day and night for the next 2 days, these mallards drove me absolutely insane. There was just nothing I could do to get rid of them. I'd shoo them off in the night, and then they'd be back all through the night. I was losing the plot. They would literally, I felt so close to catching one. I thought, I've got it here. I've seen them here. I've baited it. They're on me the first morning, and then the mallards just came in and literally destroyed it. Like, literally, there was just no fishing. And I'm thinking, if I put the bait there again, I mean, we're talking a dozen mallards here, and it's only 3.5, 4 foot deep, and they were just demolishing it. But anyway, this rod I got out at 90 yards. Although I hadn't seen anything else show there, I'd had a bit of a lead about, and there was nothing amazing. It was just sort of choddy silt, bit of like that blacky dead weed on the bottom. But I decided I was going to put all my bait there this trip. A little bit deeper. I thought, it's out the way of the mallards. It's out there. So that trip, I put all the bait out there. I came back the following week, so now we're on to the third trip. And by now, the algae had got ridiculous. I mean, it was like, I'd never fished in lake with algae before, but this was just next level. I had like brown rods, brown blanks at the time, and I had my tips under the water. It took the colour out the tips of my rods, bleached them. It was thick in the margins, pea soup. I mean, I was fishing with braid. I couldn't get it down. The only way I could keep my braid down was to fish captive backleads, 2.5 ounce captive backleads under the tips with real tight lines. You was literally battling against the braid, trying to rise in the water against it.
What do you feel about? Because I asked you this question on the phone the other day, didn't I? About algae. I mean, does it put you off in any way?
At the time, it was a bit daunting. I'd never fished a lake with algae, and I didn't really know what to make of it. And to be honest, that trip was a nightmare. I had 3 days where I didn't really feel like I was fishing. Like my braid kept floating. Like the weed was drifting around, so every bit of weed that came through the swim was taking me out. Nothing for the first 2 days really happened. I'm starting to think, bloody hell, I felt close last week, and now this algae's taking that chance away from me. But then I can remember on the Sunday morning, I had a liner. I can just remember my tip just pulling down into the captive back. I can remember seeing the tip pulled out. I thought, is that a liner? And then I just saw these little patches of white frothy bubbles coming up on the spot, and I had a few more liners that morning. I thought, they're bloody on me here. Like, that's fish. Didn't catch anything, but that was enough that, like, obviously I'm taking a lot of bait with me every week. I didn't know it was going to be that pea green algae when I got there. So anyway, I took a load of bait anyway, and after seeing that bit of fishing on the Sunday, there was obviously fish out there, so I thought, sod it, I'll just fill it in. I filled it in, went home, come back the week after, and that was the first trip I actually caught. I think my first bite was a fish they call one of the triplets, just under £30. Then I had a common mid-20. It's amazing, and when you get them on the bait, like, all of a sudden it can, like we were saying before, all of a sudden it can become easy. And I think I had 3 that trip. And in my mind now, I'm thinking, right, that's it. Nobody else is here. Nobody else is baiting. There's a couple of other people fishing the lake, but I know nobody's baiting like this. I'm catching a few. I've got a good chance of the baby black here. So I've gone back the following week, baited. I can't remember if I caught the following week or not. But things happened every week then. Whether some weeks I didn't catch, they're very much so like a moon in that lake. But even on the weekends that weren't a moon, if I didn't catch one, I was still seeing bits out there, the odd show, liners, bit of bubbling. And then about, I can't remember exactly, but now we're into probably mid-August, and I've caught a fish called scale on the shoulder, which is one of the A-team as such, real nice, dart one, big scales, biggest scales I've ever seen on its shoulder. And to me, that was a key fish. Now I'm thinking, right, I've got a chance of the baby black here. And yeah.
How regularly did the baby black come out? Was it one of the
At the time then, not a lot. It was once or a couple of times a year maybe, but I think that was probably mainly due to the lack of angling pressure. I mean, go back to when Oz caught it, and it was a rare fish, but the lake was super quiet. You only had a few people fishing it. The busier the lake's got, obviously the increased angling pressure means inevitably. Now it's about 4 captures a year.
Yeah.
It's done that for the last few years. So we're approaching, I think it was the September full moon. I've caught a few. I've caught one of the A-team as such, and I've just thought, right, this is it. Got down there for September full moon, and I really thought that this was mine. Baby black was well due out. And yeah, I caught one that first morning, which was, that first morning, I had a repeat of scale on the shoulder again. So I had it, this was 2 weeks after the first time I caught it. And then the phone's gone that morning, and basically somebody told me that a lad had caught the baby black off the point. It was his first bite from the lake, first fish, just random. And I was like, I wasn't that disheartened because there's loads of nice fish in that lake, and I was still in the early part of my campaign. But I can't help, he caught it close in off the point on a fresh southwesterly, only a few hundred yards as the fish swims from my baited zone. Like basically as they'd have backed off that fresh wind. I did have a few that trip as well. I had scale on the shoulder that morning, a couple more after that. And I can't help but think that if it hadn't have slipped up that morning, close enough to the point, that at some point over the weekend, I'd have had a bloody good chance. No doubt it had fed on that bait out in the pond. But anyway, that was it. It was done. Carried on fishing that autumn, caught a few more. No more of the 18 as such, just a few stockies, another triplet, one they call the small lever, the little lever, which is like a mid-20. I caught a fish called the gash fish, which is like a nice long scaly one, looks a bit different to the rest of them. And then it eventually, come sort of September time, end of September, it dried up. It just stopped happening on that spot. I did a few trips elsewhere around the pond, seeing odd fish, but never really felt on them. But there was this one zone I kept clocking the odd one show, and that was out in front of a swim called the Woods. And this one week, I'd sort of got this plan in my mind. I was like, right, I'm going to go in that bloody Woods swim. I hadn't fished it prior to this because Scott Lloyd was on there at the time, and he'd done a bit in the Woods. But at this point, he hadn't been down for about a month. And I thought, well, no one's been in there for ages. I keep seeing the odd one show over there. So I've sort of got this plan in my mind. I'm going to go in the Woods. Anyway, I've turned up there that Thursday. By now we're in October. By now we're at the end of October. So a bit of time's gone as I've been flitting around the pond. Nothing's happened. Just sort of chasing them around on the odd still shows. You know, obviously everything's starting to wind down now, isn't it? Like that time of year. So end of October, I've moved over to the Woods. Oh, that was it. I've turned up there on the Thursday and I pulled up in the Pingewood gate first and just stood in the bomb swim just to have a little look on the road bank. And it was sort of that evening light, you know, that time of the year, it's sort of getting dark, isn't it, by 7 o'clock. And it was just like that last bit of light, sort of dusky. And I glanced over towards the Woods and one just showed in front of the sailing club. And I thought, right, you need to get over there. All week I'd sort of had the Woods in my mind, and then that was just like, right, you need to get out. That's it. You need to be in the Woods. But the funny thing about the Woods, probably the main reason I'd sort of held off there is, although it's a really good swim, in theory, because it fishes out to the middle of the pond, like right out to the middle of the pond, like it had actually no track record at that point. In fact, I don't know of anybody that had caught a fish out of the Woods for probably 10 years or more, which sounds crazy. But so you've always got that at the back of your mind. But I kept seeing them there, and it was just an area that no one had fished for a while. And the beauty of the Woods as well is, I mean, people are doing it now, and so I assume you're allowed to do it, but I did it all under the cover of darkness because I didn't know whether you were allowed to do it or not. But basically, there's a peninsula for the sailing club that you're in the Woods swim, and if you wade out from the Woods along the right-hand margin, you can get onto this sailing club peninsula, which is like a point that if you walk up it, you're right out in the middle. And I'd already got this plan in my mind, especially once I'd seen that fish show sort of 20, 30 yards out off the tip of the peninsula. I thought, I'm just going to wait for it to go dark. I'm going to wade up there, 3 little bags, cast them for drops, scatter them around around the tip, and just wade them back to the swim. So I did that, got there, had a bit of a lead around first. It was surprisingly clear, whether that was because they'd been out there for the last few weeks or not. But yeah, I just literally 3 little PVA bags, a couple of crushed boilies in there, simple fishing. Waded each rod individually up to the tip, cast them out, fanned them out for drops at sort of roughly 30 yards, 40 yards. They all went out there lovely. And waded them back to the swim. Morning was very quiet. Didn't see anything. I had a few little liners in the night, a few odd little bleeps. I can remember that because, oh no, that was it. I caught a tench in the night. Now it's a tench, only a tench, but that was the first bite I'd had since the middle of September when I was baiting the 4-boy. I'd been flitting around the pond and it just wasn't happening, but first night in the Woods I've had a tench. And I was getting these odd little liners and whatnot. And anyway, the morning was quiet, I didn't see anything. But I can remember I was sat there and about lunchtime, I see one show and I thought, that can't be far off the rigs, like sort of thing. Anyway, the day went on, and about 4 o'clock, the only reason I still had the rods out at 4 o'clock is because of the way I couldn't really redo the rods, or I thought I couldn't really redo the rods until it went dark, because I didn't want to arouse suspicion. I didn't know if he was allowed to be on the sailing club. I'm pretty sure you probably wasn't, although people do now, and it seems to be a bit more lenient. But not only did I not know if he was allowed to, I didn't want people to see what I was doing. So I thought I'll leave the rods out all day. And 4 o'clock that afternoon, completely out of the blue, I've had a bite on the middle rod. I can remember there was someone in the bay to my left at the time. I didn't even want them to see me. So I'm like sort of stood behind the trees, tipped down, just coaxing this fish back from out in the middle. And he's popped up under the rod tips. And it was one of the triplets again. The first fish I'd caught from the lake. Was it the first fish? Anyway, it was one of the triplets. I'd caught 2 triplets at this point. There's 3 of them. No surprise. But yeah, there's 3 triplets in the lake. Very similar looking mirrors, all mid to upper 20s, scraper 30s. And it was one of those again. A repeat, but still I thought, here we go, like, I'm on to something here. It's the end of October. And first night in this swim, I've got one. Not only have I got one, this is the first fish I know that's been caught out of here for bloody 10... I might be wrong. People could have caught them out there on the slide, but to my knowledge... you know, I know some chap did catch 2 out of there years and years and years ago, but I'm going back years. I think it was a chap called Dan. But anyway, I'm going back years. It doesn't matter anyway. But in recent times, I don't think this. So anyway, I've caught one. The next day, I got the rigs out again that night, and unfortunately, the sailing club come out at 11 o'clock on a Sunday. Just before they came out, I can remember seeing one show again, and then the sailing club came out, which basically means I had to reel in. The slipway for the sailing club was right just down my right-hand margin, so that's where they launched the boat, so I had to reel the rigs in. But I wasn't too disheartened, because in my mind I'm thinking, right, it's the end of October, I'm on a minute. I thought, right, this is it. Like, now we're coming to the baby black hadn't been out for over a month now. Englefield at that point had no winter form, but in my mind, one of my mates had caught a stocky from there just before Christmas, about 4 years prior to this. That was the only carp I know had been caught out of Englefield in the winter. But everything about that lake made me think, this has got winter potential. It's big, it's open, the algae kills all the weed off, it's relatively shallow. I've just caught one in October. You know, all of a sudden in my mind I'm thinking, I'm going to catch the baby black this winter. Like, that was then my goal. Like, I'm going to catch it from the woods. So I've gone away, buzzing from this one capture of this triplet. I am buzzing. Again, you know, all guns blazing. I've gone from 6 weeks of not a lot happening into all of a sudden it's all guns blazing. And then, unfortunately, the following week, I finished work on the Thursday. I even managed to finish early. And like a bloody idiot, in my excitement to get down to the lake, I actually went into the back of somebody and wrote my van off.
Oh, dear.
That was it was a massive anticlimax, I tell you. I was so desperate. I was gunning to get back down the lake. It was completely my own fault, really. I mean, the van I was driving at the time was an old Peugeot partner. I mean,
Were you thinking about that carp too much?
Yeah, well, it was pouring down with rain. I was on a 40 road. I literally glanced down for a split second to mess with the radio. Oh, in a split second, but this is how it happens, innit? I glanced back up, car in front had stopped. I slammed the brakes on, and I slid like I was on ice skates, the 40 yards or so, straight into the back of her. And yeah, that was the end of that. Massive blow at the time, and that pretty much put me out of action for 5 weeks. 5 weeks where I'm thinking, God, I'd love to be sat in them woods. Anyway, I've sorted myself out, managed to get myself a new van, etc., etc. And 5 weeks later, I'm on the way back down there, going in for it. But by now, it's December, the first week of December. Yeah, it was the first, or maybe end of November, sometime, end of November, beginning of December. It's about that time. Gone back down there, straight into the woods. Obviously, it's pitch black now when I get there on a Thursday or Friday. I think I was getting there now. I think I'd used all my holiday. Pitch black, but that suited my angling in this swim. Like, everything with this swim suited my plan for the winter. I could walk the rods out, short range. I'm right in the middle. I can get there in the dark. Everything suited me. Got back, nobody had been in the swim for that 5 weeks. I could just tell by the leaf litter in the swim. Got the rods out. A few liners that trip, didn't catch anything, but I can't remember if I've seen anything or not. But still, you know, I've come back the following week, got the rods out, caught one, a stocky. Again, it was a repeat, one that I'd caught in the winter, mid 30, one I call Quasimodo. I think most people call it split peck, but it's got a real sort of bit of an ugly fish, bless it. So I call it Quasimodo. Got a bit of a hunchback, but I caught that one. And now I'm thinking, right, so I've caught one first trip. I've had 5 weeks away where God knows what's happened. 2 weeks into coming back, bear in mind, I'm not baiting this zone. I'm just fishing it with little bags. They were there. They were naturally just there. And I've had another 2 weeks back. I'm thinking now we're into December. We're into December now. We're definitely well into December now. And the following week, that was it. That was the second week in December, because the following week, I was down there for an 11-nighter in the run.
Wow, that's a long session.
Was it an 11-nighter? 9-nighter? It was a big trip. Basically, I had a good few, pretty much a week off work, Christmas. I can't remember exactly how, but it was a big trip. I had a big trip planned, 9 nights, 10 nights, 11 nights, something like that. A really big trip for me. It was only because of Christmas. So I've gone down there, and in my mind, all I'm thinking is, right, I'm going to catch the baby black this winter. I really felt like I had a good chance of it. I've had a couple, hardly anyone else was fishing the lake. I had clocked a couple of other people on the other bank, but I was so one-track minded that as far as I'm concerned, I was on them, I was catching them. I've got a chance of the black here. And literally, that day at work, I'm all loaded up, ready to go. That day at work, when I'm literally finishing work that afternoon to go on my Christmas trip, text come through. Baby black's been out. Some bloke again, a chap called Trevor. I mean, fair play to him. Mega bit of angling. Had clocked a bit of bubbling close in on the far bank. This is the story. And basically, one bite, again, his first bite. He hadn't long been fishing the lake. And he caught the baby black. I mean, you know, at the time, that was a bit of a blow. I ain't going to lie, because I was just geared up for this big mega trip. I thought, I've got a good chance of it here. And, I found out it'd been out, but it did sort of prove my theory that it would come out in the winter. Yeah. So, there you go. Anyway, basically, I did that trip and caught bugger all. It was just all of a sudden a massive anticlimax. Black had been out, but anyway, I fished that trip out. Nothing happened. And then I think I might have done 2 more trips into January, and then I pulled off. I came back that following April. I left it till April. First, I'd been fishing elsewhere through the winter, so I thought I'll leave it till the first weekend in April.
Has anything else been out of the lake over that period?
Not as far as I know. I don't think the lake did another bite in that period. Anyway, I've come back first weekend in April, and the lake was super quiet again. There was only one other chap, Sean, down the far end. He was in the blocks. And I actually dropped in the point, which is like these days, it's 1 in, 1 out, But anyway, I dropped in the point. It was my first night back. What a better, it was pole position as such. Best view on the lake. Dropped in there. And kicking myself, really, because the next morning, first couple of fish I seen show was out in front of the bloody woods. I thought, why didn't I just go straight back in there? So anyway, I've moved round to the woods that day, flicked out my PVA bags, and that night I actually caught 2. They were only small commons, but, mega way to start the spring off. First trip back, first move of the spring, and I've had 2. Only small ones, but I've had 2. For the next few weeks, I sort of chased them around the pond. But my next reel... I had another one from the woods a couple of weeks later. Again, just a stocky. And then my next real opportunity came on the bank holiday weekend, the Easter bank holiday weekend, which I think that year fell, I think it was the last week of April or something. I don't know, last weekend of April. But anyway, it was red hot and it was blowing an easterly and it was down the reeds on the far end of the lake. I was actually set up in the stumps, but the one day I'd clocked a couple getting right in on the reeds. So the next morning, I sort of hatched this plan that if I hadn't caught anything from the stumps by 10 o'clock, I was going to wind in, get in the reeds and flick them out across the reeds. So that's what I did. Wound them in, flicked them across the reeds, and just single pop-ups. And that day I had a fish called white tips, 37-pounder, or 36-pounder at the time. I've had it since, it was 37.5 £, but I think that capture was 36 £, or something. But a mega one, real nice fish, long one.
It's got a picture of it there.
There's a picture of white tips.
Yeah, there it is, yeah. That was off the reeds.
It's a really nice, leathery looking fish. Again, a really classic Reading dark fish as well.
Typical of that strain of carp that's in Englefield.
Is that a male, that one?
It is. They're all males. That's something interesting.
They?
Other than the leather, all the big fish in Englefield are males, which means they're all year-round big uns. which
that's interesting.
It is. Not many lakes where all the big ones are males.
That's really rare, isn't it?
Yeah. So I caught that one. Mega fish. Was chuffed with that. And I did a bit more on them reeds over the next couple of weeks. And basically, I came really close to the black, not catching it. But the following trip, I think it was, I spent on the reeds and they were all there. They were clouding it up. I'd seen them all. I'd seen the black coming in right under my feet. And I didn't catch anything. I had one bite and it was a tiny little common. I literally had it on the surface and then it was like a tench, but I saw it was a little common. It was thrashing around on the surface and it just come off. But yeah, didn't catch anything. And then I wasn't surprised to find out that after seeing that sight and seeing them all by the reeds that day and not catching anything, about 48 hours later, I was informed that they'd spawned down there. My following trip, I come back, went straight back to the reeds, had a look, devoid of fish. Which, going by, it is typical. Going on the Burghfield carp, once they spawn, Burghfield carp have got a lot of lake they can choose from, a lot of bays, but generally once the Burghfield carp had spawned in an area, they would completely vacate that zone then for weeks. So I've come back down and I knew they'd spawned by the reeds. I've seen nothing about, and in my mind, that's it, that's the reed done. That trip, I think I did a few nights here and there, but I ended up fishing in a swim called the Causeway. I'd seen a couple show close in on the Causeway. Not only had I seen a couple close in on the Causeway, I'd seen the majority of the stock in the corner of the bay up the other end, which is basically about 150 yards up the bank from the Causeway swim, the water you fish, is this little snaggy corner of a bay, and they love to get in there in the day, and I'd seen them all in there, baby black the lot. Clocked this one show in the Causeway, which is much deeper, weedier water. So I sort of already hatched this other plan. I was sort of thinking, well, they might be they obviously using this bank a bit more now, spending the day sat up in the snags in that bay. I fished that night in the Causeway. Nothing happened, although they did turn up on me the next morning. I had a lot of bait with me, so I piled it all into the Causeway. That was the first time I'd actually baited that year. I'd just been sort of chasing them around up until this point. But now we're sort of getting into June. They'd spawned. That's why I took loads of bait. I knew they'd spawned, so now I've got loads of bait with me ready to give them a bit. Put it all in the Causeway. Come back the following week, and I actually had 4 bites that first morning fishing in the Causeway. No monsters, couple of commons and a couple of stockies. One real nice stocky. Looks a bit like a leeny. Real nice fish, actually, to say it's a stockfish. But and then the next morning, I caught scale on the shoulder again. So now I've had scale on the shoulder 3 times.
Oh my god!
It was a bit of a friend of mine, that one. So I caught scale on the shoulder for the 3rd time, and then nothing the last morning of the trip. Although I did bait it, because over the course of that trip, I still kept checking the bay in the day, and they were still turning up in the bay. So all of a sudden, I'm thinking, they're using this bank to feed in the morning. They're in the bay, they've spawned down that far end. That's done. So all of a sudden I forgot the far end where I'd seen them all weeks before, and now I'm focused on this end. Anyway, the following trip, obviously I baited again, and I'm buzzing for it. I've had 5 bites that previous trip, and the following trip, phones rang as I'm driving down there on the Thursday, and it was Scott Lloyd, and it was one of them phones. I said the phone ring, and I thought, I need to answer this call. I knew. I just knew. I just had that feeling why he was ringing me. And fair play to him. Basically, he was there. It was his first trip back of the year. He hadn't been there for a while. He was there. He was stood in the Causeway, and the wind was pushing in lovely. Now, he did catch one out the Causeway a couple of years previously. That's how I knew that. Looking at the weather conditions and seeing his name on the phone, I knew where he was and where he wanted to go, if you know what I mean. So I've answered the phone. I was like, all right, mate. He's like, all right, mate. He's like, I've just turned up. Fair play, because I know Scott from Burghfield and that. And he was like, look, I know you do your thing and whatever. I just wanted to see if you were baiting anywhere or anything. I was like, mate, I am gunning for the Causeway. I'm on the way now. He's like, mate, it's a good job I rang you, because I'm stood in here now with my bucket. I was like, flipping it. I was like, mate. He's like, no, don't worry. I'll go next door in the sling. And I was like, I was like, mate, you are a flipping legend. Cheers.
Fair play.
Yeah, fair play to him. So anyway, I've got down there. Scott's dropped his bucket in the sling. I've got in the causeway. Happy days. And we both fished that night. I fished the causeway. Like he fished the sling. I can remember he had an absolute nightmare trying to get drops, obviously, by this point of the year.
Probably looking at your swimming thinking.
Yeah, well, in fact, I can remember I literally flicked my rigs out with 2 casts, just bang, bang. And he's there thrashing it to a foam. I actually felt a little bit guilty. But I wasn't fishing, to be honest, I wasn't fishing where he would have fished in that swim. I was fishing a lot shorter. But still, fair play to him. I mean, proper bit of etiquette there. And the next morning, he went for a walk, as he does. And I can remember he found a few fish down by the reeds at the far end, in that reed swim where I caught white tips from. And where I'd seen them all 2 weeks previously. They'd spawned, I'd writ it off. He found a few down there, bobbing around in the weed. I can remember him ringing me up saying, I found a few down, I'm going to move. I was like, yeah, fair play, mate. Didn't really think much of it because Scott's one of them anglers, he loves to move on to fish, and that lake I've tried it, it doesn't pay off a lot. You know, Scott will probably tell you that himself. Chasing around on that lake, it doesn't pay off an awful lot. But anyway, so I didn't think a lot of it. I can remember him saying he'd seen a few crusty blackbacks and that floating around. Not a lot. He'd actually had a nightmare that evening. I can remember we ordered a pizza, and when he come down to get his pizza, he was flustered. He was like, that bloody swans, da-da-da-da. And, 4 o'clock that morning, 4:30, just as it was breaking light, I've clocked a few show out in front of the woods. Now, I've had a few from the woods now. Scott's done a bit previously in the woods. And I've clocked these show out in front of the woods, and then my phone started ringing. Scott Lloyd, I thought, he's clocked them shows as well, and now he's about to say, have you seen them? Like, we're basically about to race to the woods. Answer the phone, he's like, I've got it. I was like, what? He's like, yeah, I've got it. I was like, oh. I was like, fair play. Yeah, mate, fair play to him. He'd gone down there, he'd caught it.
Yeah, you can't argue too much with that.
No, I mean, like...
I think Scott would probably say that's justice for me a little bit.
Yeah, mate, fair play to him. Like, how it panned out for it. I mean, he'd done a lot of time on that lake as well. It was well deserved for Scott.
How long did he fish it for then? So he went on there after catching the common?
Yeah, he went on there after catching the common, and he'd fished it for at least a couple of summers.
What was it, 2017 he caught that?
Yeah. So I think he'd fished it. No, he caught it 2017. So I think he fished it the rest of the summer 2017, 2018, and then he sort of pulled off. I think he'd sort of half given up on the place. The impression are not given up on it, but sort of.
Did he see what you saw with, that this lake is somewhere where, because I've seen Scott's fishing blogs and stuff, and he does, doesn't he? He definitely likes creeping around and
chasing
catching them
around.
And, Did he see that as well, that perhaps he needed to be sat in one swim? Or
I think in hindsight he'll probably look at that because, I mean, I tried chasing him around in the springs, and although I did catch odd ones like white tips, those couple of little commons, generally I didn't catch a lot doing that.
Do you think spring's a better time of year for doing that, though, if you're going to do that?
Yeah, if you're going to chase fish around, do it in the spring, on a big pit, the lake warms up, the fish are exploring all these areas of the lake that they haven't been for months. And they can get into these zones, and they're only there for hours sometimes. But yeah, come summer, obviously the weeds up, and fish will favour areas for more prolonged periods then, because the weed will hold them there, or some kind of factor will keep them there. But yeah, the spring is generally a time of the year where I will be chasing them around, just because they're not eating a lot, especially in these bigger pits. That. You're just generally whacking singles at them and stuff. Once they've spawned, the whole game changes, I find. I mean, other people might find it different, but that's just
it's definitely a game changer.
Yeah.
The thing is, if you're fishing a traditional fishing season, you kind of bypass that different type of fishing. And go straight, and normally you're almost straight into post spawn, or you're around that sort of time.
Straight into that baiting time. But yeah, basically, as soon as late autumn comes, November time, December, I'm back into that sort of chasing them around mode. In the winter, you're just fishing for a bite where they are. Winter, spring, and then once they've spawned, then start to get a bit of baiting. And then you can get some kind of consistency with your fishing then, you can build up a real good, you can really work your way through the stock if you get them on the bait as such, if you get it right. But so yeah, Scott caught it, and that was that was signalled the end of the spring for me, and I'd been offered a ticket on that Wellman's that we mentioned briefly earlier. Absolute, little 15-man syndicate down the road, somewhere I'd have loved to have fished. Absolute paradise as such. So all spring I've had this ticket, and it's always been niggling at the back of my mind. Oh, desperate to go and have a go on there. So I was almost looking for an excuse to pull off, and Scott's capture was that excuse. Scott's caught it, so I've gone down the road, and I had a couple of months down the road. Had a great bit of fishing over there. I pretty much had the place to myself. You can use boats or whatever, and I did really well. I caught a few. I was catching them from the off, really, but I went on there at the perfect time. I mean, it's an incredibly low stock lake, that one down the road. Big lake, I think it's about 80 acres. But I timed it right. It's the start of June. The weed was up. The fish, they'd cleaned areas. I've got a boat. All I had to do was look for where the fish was and the spots they were clean. It seemed relatively easy. The big un hadn't been out for 2 years, I think, at this point. I saw the big un in there, which was like, it was a 50-pound common. Its biggest weight was 48.10 in September, 2 years prior. But I'm telling you, it was a 50-pound common this spring. It hadn't been caught in the spring since 2011, and it was flipping massive. I saw it twice in the run-up to my birthday in July in this little back bay, and it hadn't been out for a couple of years, and I've just got it in my mind that I'm going to catch this fish. I'd seen it. There's no one else fishing. I'd baited that area. Got down for my birthday weekend, sort of expecting to catch it, and got there all excited, got the rigs out, and the next morning went out in the boat for a mooch about, and yards away from where I'd last seen it the previous week, I found it bloody dead. So that was a bit of a blow. I did do a couple more trips over there, caught a couple more, but that was a bit of a blow. There are other fish in there, it's still a mega place, but that was the catchable big one. And, like I say, I'd gone down there expecting to catch it, and I found it dead instead. Me and my mate buried it. I dread to think how big it was, but we dug a bloody deep hole and it filled it. So, yeah, that was the end of that. The baby black did actually come out again in that period. And funny enough, it was actually the period that I ended up catching it this year, was that period that I took off. So anyway, I had them 2 months off. Came back at the end of, when did I come back? So I did June, July. Yeah, I came back at the end of July. And in my mind, I already had this plan. The reason I came back then is because I knew that the algae would probably have peaked by then. And that was the sort of, I'd be coming back at the start of the period where I did really well the previous year. And I was just going to sort of try and carry on that sort of baiting. But I didn't really want to do it in the 4-buoy, because although I'd caught scale on the shoulder twice from there, all the other fish I'd caught were relatively small, shall we? They were 30-pounders, mid-20s, but there was none of the other A-team, and there definitely seems to be noticeable, there's no, like, the A-team do tend to get caught together and from similar zones, and in my mind I'd sort of got it that was a small fish area. I don't know. I just didn't think that was going to be the one. So for the first couple of trips, I was looking elsewhere. I did an odd trip here and there. And we were a couple of trips in, and the majority of the fish were spending a lot of the time out in front of the swim called the Sling. There was a massive amount of weed there. I was hearing him jump in the night over there and all sorts, but there was a lad I know he'd already sort of baited. You know what it's like, I'd come back at that time and I wasn't going to go and drop next to him, but it was a bit frustrating knowing that the real opportunity was there, and without treading on my mate's toes, I couldn't go anywhere near it. So I'm still looking elsewhere, and I can remember the end of this, like my second or third trip back, I've just thought, I've had loads of bait with me, and I didn't really know, and I just thought, right, well, I might as well put it back in the 4-buoy. We're at that time where I was catching them from here last year. I hadn't really seen anything out there this year, but I had loads of bait with me, and I thought, well, at least I'm putting it in a good zone where I can something to come back to next week. So I put the bait out there, And that week, the weather changed. The forecast changed. It went sort of southwesterlies, low pressure, sort of autumnal conditions. And I've dropped in the 4-boy that trip, just on a whim, whacked my rigs out there, load of bait. And the next morning, they started showing just out to the right. And I thought, bloody hell, they're here. Like, a bit closer in than what I was fishing, but where they show to the right in the 4-boy, sort of behind the buoys, I'd seen them there a bit. Like, it's a zone they like to show in because they can't get cast to there because of the way the buoys are, but they were in the zone. I can remember I was sat with my mate Byron at the time, and then out the blue, I mean, they didn't start showing until the afternoon, funnily enough. Yeah, it was the afternoon, yeah. And we sat there, and out the blue, right-hand rod over the bait has just melted off. Bear in mind, I haven't seen anything. I've just baited this zone now, the 4-boy again, on a whim, just knowing it was a good area last year. You know, I had been looking to bait elsewhere, but I didn't really know what to do, so I chucked it in the 4-boy, come back first trip, and first day I'm fishing the bait, I've had a bite, right-hand rod, felt a good one all the way in. I could see this crusty black back as it was coming closer. It was quite windy. I can remember my mate stood on the bank going, "Oh, that looks like a big sort of black." Anyway, got it in the net. Bloody scale on the shoulder again.
4 times.
4th time. So basically, I've had it consecutive. It was my last bite before I pulled off, and then I've come back 2 months later. I started baiting on the opposite side of the lake, and it was my first bite coming back again. 4th capture. In that, it sounds like a mugfish. But that fish, prior to my first capture, it hadn't been out for 18 months. And it never came out to anybody else in that. Oh, no, I tell a lie, actually. I did find out later on that it had been caught that sort of later that spring while I wasn't there. So it had done 1 capture to somebody else in that time. But anyway, scale on the shoulder again. I thought, for God's sake, it almost felt like that was the only fish in the lake at that point. So anyway, but still, at least fish were on the bait. Anyway, the next night was quiet, but my final night of that trip, I had a bite in the early hours, absolute melter, and I've got these captive batleds on because the algae's bad, and by now I've sort of got they just pin everything down. You've got big drifting weed beds, and it's something I'd never used on any other lake before, but a mate had put me onto them, and they really suited that lake. You could wade them out in the margins, and you could pin your lines down, especially with a braid. You could, they really held everything down. But I've had this melter in the early hours, and I've picked the rod up. It's pitch black, and I'm like, what's going on here? I'm bloody tethered to the captive batled. It's wrapped round the line in the darkness, and this fish is just melting off towards the middle, and I can just see in the moonlight my captive batled just on the. Oh, bloody hell. So I've managed to
So what, wrap round the...
Wrap round, it was like on the braid, up there. I'm like playing this fish, it's still taking line to the middle, and I could just see my captive. I'm trying to bounce it off, and it's just me bouncing it off. I'm just wrapping it round more.
Yeah.
So I've just had to literally put the butt of the rod on the deck behind me in the darkness. I've sort of got the rod resting over my shoulder with the fish still just steadily taking line out to the middle. And I'm fumbling around, and I've managed to grab this captive batled. I've pulled it down, and I've bit through the cord with my teeth. I don't know how.
You broke that cord?
I bit through it with my teeth. Chucked the cord. Anyway, pulled it off. Got the fish in. And it was the lungfish.
Right.
Which, mega carp, one of the A team, known fish that hangs around with the black. One I really wanted to catch. All of a sudden, the game's changed now. I've had 2 bites from this zone, this trip, and they're both 18 fish. I'm thinking the black's out there, it's out there. Anyway, baited again, really heavy. Got back the following week, which was the full moon trip, and got the rods out. Massive bucket of bait. Didn't finish spomming until dark, which at that time of the year, it's about now, maybe a couple of weeks ago, but last year, dark was about 9:30. I can remember I spommed till dark. It was about 9:30. 2:30 in the morning, I've had another bite, played it in. I can remember there was a couple of floating weed beds in the swim. There was a couple in my line lay which I cleared, but I can remember there was just one about 60 yards out to the left, about as big as this table. And I can remember before dark thinking, shall I drag that in? And I thought, nah, it's well out the way. You don't need to. Anyway, playing this fish in the darkness. It's kited round to the left, and it's just ground to a bloody halt. And I could just hear it out there, wallowing about. I'd just beached it out of all, like everywhere in the swim, this fish had managed to get around the back of this weed bed, and I just beached it on the back of the weed bed in the darkness. I could just hear it wallowing out there, and it sounded like a good one, and I'm thinking, oh, for God's sake. And it couldn't gain anything. Like, I was thinking, anyway, I don't know why, but I've just looked down at the other rods, and I don't know why it wasn't bleeping or what, or whether it was something to do with the back lead or what, but as I'm pulling, I can just see the tip on one of my other rods just pulling down into the back lead.
Right.
And I'm tethered to another line here. So anyway, I've just popped it out the clip, took the bobbin off, opened the bail arm, give it the butt, and then it started coming, lines fizzing off. That's what it's coming. I've dragged the weed bed in, got it in the net, and that was a fish called the lever. Absolute mega one.
We've got some. We'll put some pictures up later. We will put them on the edit.
Absolute mega fish. I mean, my pictures ain't the best pictures in the world. And the lake was well pea green then, so it looks a bit funny coloured. Like normally it's a lovely dark fish, but to me, I know the baby black's the one that everyone wants to catch, but this lever, it just looks a bit different to all the rest. It's got a mega underslung mouth. It's just a mega carp. Only comes out once or twice a year as well. Quite a rare one. One I really wanted to catch, but that made it 18 fish on the bounce. So now I'm thinking, bloody hell.
There's just one to go. Or?
Well, there's one more in there called twofold, but that's a bit of a random fish, that. Not only is it really rare, it doesn't seem... I mean, it has been caught. I don't know, bit of a funny one. But there is one other 18 fish, so it wasn't one more to go. But how friendly baby black is compared to twofold, in my mind, I was one bite away at that point. You know, I've caught 3 of the 18, 3 of the big ones. Like, basically, the second and third biggest fish in the lake. I'd had probably... In fact, yeah, second and third biggest fish in the lake. The lever and the lungfish. I just thought I was one more bite away from the black. I thought it was coming that trip. It was the full moon trip. I'd caught the lever on the first night. But something massively changed that trip, and it was the weather. Basically, I don't know if you can remember last year, but we had a bit of a mini heat wave came in, sort of about now. And it started that trip, and it went red hot. And I'm fishing out in the pond, and the conditions the previous couple of weeks had been almost autumnal, and now it's red hot, and basically the heat took them away from me.
What about the algae and stuff on there that year?
The algae, last year as well? It was bad. It was bad, but because I'd left it a bit later, I hadn't come on there till the end of July. The peak of the algae had already been, so I came on. It was green. The lake was green, but it's as it peaks that the fishing seems to suffer. Once it's peaked, especially in a lake like Englefield, where they see it every year.
If it peak lasts, a few weeks or so, and then
it
starts
it's probably a fortnight up to it peaks. It'll peak, and then it'll sort of start to dwindle. Then it can take months to clear out. In fact, Englefield tends to stay pretty grey and murky all winter. But yeah, I forgot where I was there.
No, sorry, you say you came back about this time last year, and
so the algae had gone. So anyway, the weather changed dramatically. It went red hot, and I didn't catch anything else that trip. I caught the lever on the first morning, nothing else that trip. But stupidly, this is where I went majorly wrong. I still filled it in on the Sunday. I put a load of bait out there, hoping that the weather would change, they'd still be out there. I didn't realise at that point, as I've said before, hindsight's a wonderful thing in carp fishing, isn't it? But at that point, I didn't realise that they were going to completely vacate that area. So I put a load of bait out there, come back the following week, and nothing happened. And as the trip went on, I reeled in and I started to notice for the first time ever, I've never had this in my fishing before, but my leads were smelling sour. Like sour. And I thought, bait's out there rotting. Like, it ain't been touched. Anyway, so I fished that trip out, and I put a bit of bait out at the end of the trip, but not a lot. But I'd obviously put a big hit of bait out when I got there again, because that's how I was catching them, over these big hits of bait. So anyway, I come back for the second trip after, I caught the lever, blanked the rest of that trip, blanked the following trip, come back the next trip, and I'm already getting these doubts in my mind. I've done the first night, reeled in, and my leads, hook baits, the lot, even the lead, everything just smelt. I was like, no. that spot's gone sour. Like, you know, the bait's out there rotting. And it was red hot. Like I say, this mini heat wave had come in, and everything I was now seeing were in the shallower areas of the lake again. It was like the heat had just drew them back into the shallows, into the shallow. I can't help but think that weather took that chance of the baby black away from me at that
Sorry,
point.
how long was that bait set out there for?
By this point, he'd been out there a couple of weeks.
Yeah.
Since I caught the leather, I sort of got a feeling that I caught the leather, that it went warm that trip, and then hardly anything had
Just turned the bait over to...
Yeah, even the tench activity had slowed right down, and what also happened, that coincided then, by now we're into September, and it coincided with quite a few other anglers turning up. So you got 4 or 5 other anglers now, all fishing across the road bank. I mean, the road bank on Burghfield is where most of the swims from. They're all sort of in line. So all of a sudden you got 4 or 5 blokes all baiting across the road bank, all sort of fishing the same range out there. My spot had lost its appeal, not least because, you know, in my mind it's the bait's rotting out there. So I knew we were at a critical point in the autumn here. You know, baby black's due out. I felt like I was one bite away from it. The weather's changed dramatically, taken that opportunity away from me. Now everybody else is baiting across the road bank. I felt like I needed to do something else. You know, a few of my mates was like, oh, you have, you know, like to move from that swim at that time when I felt so close to it. But I just knew it wasn't the one. And so I ended up moving back into the woods again. I hadn't been seeing them over there, but I knew from the previous year that they were likely to turn up in front of there in the next few weeks. I mean, we're sort of mid-September now. And the other thing that appealed to me about the woods is it's the only swim on one side of the lake, pretty much. There are swims that fish out long sort of towards it left and right, but it commands that middle section. And the beauty of it was to me that if at least over there, my bait would stand out as such. You know,
How far out were you fishing?
From the woods, from the actual wood swim, probably 100 yards. But as I say, I could walk up this peninsula.
Yeah.
And from the end of the peninsula, I was fishing 13 wraps. So it was really quick and comfortable and easy to bait. The only problem with fishing the woods and baiting the woods for me is that the sailing club come out every Sunday. And obviously I was packing up on a Sunday and wanted to bait. So I had to wait all day for the sailing club would come out at 11 and they were due to pack away at 4. But some weeks they'd stay there till 6, 7, and I'm just sat around twiddling my thumbs, just waiting to get my bucket of bait in. But I think first trip after baiting in the woods, I caught a fish known as the gash fish. So instantly, again, it was a fish I'd had the previous year. It was another repeat, but at least I was back on him. I was back catching. And then the following trip, which was the September full moon again, by now the birds were becoming a bit of a pain. I can remember I'd been hammered by the tufties all night and all morning, and I was sort of starting to think, you know, when you start to lose hope a bit, I thought, oh God, this ain't the one. And then completely out of the blue, on the, I think it was the Saturday morning, I'd already been there a night and a morning, I think it was a Saturday morning, I'm sat there, there's about 20 tufties sat over the spot, diving on me, and just from right to left, like a bloody Mexican wave, they've all just took off. And I thought, that's strange. Perhaps someone's turned up on the sailing club, scared them off. And just as those thoughts were going through my mind, right-hand rod has melted, absolutely melted off. I've picked the rod up and it's just heading out towards the middle. So I've got the waders on. I've waded down to the right of the swim, sort of heading up towards the peninsula. And as I've started slowing this fish down, he's just bow waving, like he's bow waving out towards the middle. There's a blue, not a blue barrow, it's an orange buoy in front of the woods. I'm fishing at 13 wraps. About 30 yards beyond where I was fishing, there's this orange buoy. And I could just see this fish approaching the orange buoy. And I thought, I've got to clamp down on this here. So I've slowed it down. This massive tail's come out of the water, out in the middle of the pond, slapped down on the surface. I thought, this is it. It was noticeably a big fish. I thought, this is it. This is the black. I've chucked it's 10 o'clock in the morning, middle of the morning. Everybody on the road bank can see me. As I say, you shouldn't really go on the sailing club. And up until now, I'd only gone on there in darkness so nobody could see it. But now, in my mind, I've got the baby black on. I've chucked the net over my head and I'm just walking out towards the end of the peninsula, gaining line on this fish. There's quite a lot of weed in the channel, sort of as you come back towards between the island and this peninsula. There's quite a lot of weed, and I just didn't want to risk bringing it back through that weedy channel. I just thought, I'm wading out to the end of the peninsula where I cast from. I've got out there, it was blowing an easterly wind, the sun was up, so I couldn't really see, you get that sort of shimmering light on the water. It was noticeably a big, heavy fish. It kept coming up on the surface, rolling. I could see the length of it. I could see the shape of its head, the shoulders, and I'm thinking, this is it. This is the black. As I say, the sun's coming in, so I couldn't really see properly. Eventually got it, it's rolled a few more times, plodded about a bit, got it in the net. I thought, yes. Dragged the net in, looked down, bloody lungfish again. I'd only caught it a month earlier from the opposite side of the lake. I thought, for God's sake. But then all of a sudden I thought, shit, I'm out on the end of the peninsula. Everybody around the lake's looking at me. I've got one in the net. I've just blown my cover, basically. It was a lungfish again. I did weigh it. It was 42 pound. Bit of a blow, to be honest. I really thought that would have been it at the time. I carried on fishing that swim for the next few. That was on the full moon. Nothing else happened after that. I carried on fishing that swim for the next couple of weeks. And not a lot. Odd bits happened, but, now we're into October and I knew that chance was drifting away. And then October, about a week into October, middle of the week, while I was at work, big stormy conditions, massive low pressure come in, and it came out off the point. 49 pound it was as well, which was its top weight lake record. And that was my chance gone again.
I was going to say to you, that transition period between all that bait going off and then you fishing a new area, were you bothered about putting bait out straight away, or did it?
No, because in that time the weather had changed again. So we had sort of a 3-week heat wave, but that was enough. And that 3-week heat wave, nothing feeding on my spot out in the 4-boy for that period was enough time to let it go sour. And whether they fed on that again, I don't know. But the way my leads and rigs smelled, I just couldn't fish out there. Plus, like I say, everyone else was baiting around me. I'd lost my edge.
It's funny with rancid bait though as well, isn't it? Because they do feed on it. They do.
Yeah,
but no, the reason I asked you that is because that can. But I mean, that could play with your mind a little bit as well.
Yeah, it was a combination of factors, but something just told me I was in the wrong zone. I couldn't stay there. I had to move. Went over to the woods, and I did bait the woods from the off, but I was a little bit more cautious with the bait, I will be honest. But the weather had sort of changed again, so I wasn't so worried about putting it in. It's just like in my mind, I'd already killed that 4-boy spot. I was like, that's that ruined. Like, it's just a shame because.
When did it do a bite after that then?
Which
the 4-boy.
It didn't until I caught them this year out of there.
Right.
As far as I know, it didn't do another bite that swim until I got in there again this year. Anyway, we'll get onto that.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's that year done again. This was last year. It came out October, and that was it. Now, I did carry on. I did one trip over the road on Flint, and then going by the previous year's capture in December, I thought, right, I'm going to fish it again through the winter. I know a lot more about the lake now. There's definitely a chance of catching this fish in the winter. So I slogged it out, and my only real opportunity of the winter came in December, the week before Christmas. I clocked a few showing lung. I set up in the causeway, and I clocked a few on my first morning. I had 6 nights ahead of me, showing really long out the sling. I'd seen odd shows for the last few weeks. I'd seen odd shows basically since my last bite, but they were just odd random shows round the lake, nothing really to go on as such. But this morning I saw 3 show in the same place, lung out of the sling. I thought, right, they're there, they're out there. So anyway, I moved into the sling, got them out there lung, and over the next few days I actually caught 3. This was another trip where I had a stinking cold, not quite as bad as the brute cold, but it was bad. I had a bad cold. Bear in mind now it's the winter. The swim I was fishing was ankle deep in mud. So I literally spent 6 days wallowing around in ankle deep mud in December with a stinking cold. But I did catch 3. all stockies, as I say. One was about an 18-pounder. I had a 27-pound common and a 35-pound mirror, a stocky, one of the Junction 12 stockies. They're called that because they come from a lake called Junction 12 just down the road. But that was like sort of mid-30s. That was the biggest. I fish I'd caught before again. But it was nice to get free at that time of the year, you know. I mean, it's a hard lake at the best of times. So to get free in December was a bit of a result, really. And then, yeah, after that, I carried on all winter, actually. And not a lot else happened. I clocked one show down the end of one bay one day on the end of a really warm southwesterly wind. This was this February when we had them real mild big winds coming start of February. Saw one show on the end of the wind, and that sort of threw me because for the next few weeks we had a lot of them big mild winds coming. And I kept angling that zone on the end of that wind at the end of that bay going on that one show. And I can't help but look back now and think what a waste of time that was. You know, I should have been out in the lake. But anyway, did I put on? No, I carried on straight through, and then spring came around, and just as things started happening, I went in the 4-boy again that spring, just because it does give you a good line out to the middle, and I'd seen a few show out there. I got back in there, sort of just getting to that point of the spring where you think something's getting caught here. I think the point I'd actually done a couple of bites to one chap, and then lockdown came in. And yeah, basically, lakes were shut. None of us could go fishing. And yeah, prime time of the spring came round and we were all sat at home, not fishing. So that was a bit of a blow. But at least nobody else was fishing the lake. Anyway, we came back after lockdown. When was that? May, was it? Was it May?
Yeah, it was May, yeah.
Yeah, May.
Yeah, mid-May.
So we've come back mid-May, missed a massive part of the spring. And basically, by the time I've got back to Englefield, they're literally days away, weeks away from spawning. You know, the spring feed's gone. You know, they're now at that point where they were almost ready to spawn. They're just waiting for the right time. The weed was up terribly because no bait had gone in anyway. I mean, it is a weedy lake anyway. It gets covered in that eelgrass type weed, and it literally covers the lake that time of the year. But anyway, I spent those first few weeks, first couple of weeks, I was still furloughed off work at the time, so I was there all the time, even though it was 48 on, 48 off, because the club had enforced that rule just to give everyone a chance. I had all the time in the world. I was there the whole time. I never went home. I just stayed there. I'd fish the nights I could, and the nights I couldn't, I'd just stay, look, you know, keep an eye on what was going on. And I got on fish again down by them reeds where, you know, I was on about where they spawned the year before. A few opportunities around there. They spawned down there again, but nothing really happened. Nothing materialised. A couple of odd fish got caught out in the middle. But yeah, not a lot to go on. And in the end, I thought, right, they had a bit of a spawn, and I thought, right, I've got to start getting some bait in somewhere. It's you know, by now we're into June. So the area I had in mind, going on the previous year's captures from that causeway, that year it was very weedy around the causeway, and they were there in that bay. Now there's a swim that I'd actually cut out in February called the 6-boy, which gave you a better angle to fish this bay, and I'd sort of had this in mind. I'd looked elsewhere. If I'd seen stuff elsewhere, I'd gone elsewhere, but in the end, I thought, right, I'm going to start baiting this 6-boy for two reasons. I was expecting it's a shallow, sheltered bay, gets very weedy. They do like to get in there. Going from the year before, I was expecting them to turn up. And it's one of the few areas on that lake, especially when it's as busy as it is now, that you could get away with it. It's quite a quiet swim. So I started baiting the 6-boy, and within a couple of weeks, couple of trips, a couple of things became apparent. Although I'd seen fish visiting the bay, they just weren't hanging around. The weed was well behind on the previous years, and it just didn't quite. I caught a few tench. The spot was getting cleaner, but it just didn't feel like the one. The weather was very sort of almost autumnal. We was getting a lot of big winds, quite overcast, wet. You know, it wasn't the hot weather that I was banking on for that period of the year. And the couple of fish that were caught had been caught out towards the middle, and I'm starting to think, I'm missing a trick here. I need to be out in that middle area. And I can remember on the Sunday, like over the course of a weekend fishing in the 6 boy, I've sort of hatched this plan. I've looked at the weather, I've looked at the forecast for the next couple of weeks, and I thought, nothing was changing. I thought, I need to get out towards that middle. Now, it was a lot earlier than I expected to get back into the 4 boy area, but because of the weather and the conditions that I'd caught them in there in previous years, almost autumnal conditions, and nobody had was doing anything in the 4 boy, I thought, right, I need to get back in there early, fish out to the middle, because they ain't coming in. The weed's well behind, the weather's rubbish, they ain't coming in. They're staying out there in the middle. So I've gone round to this 4 boy with my mate. I'd actually give one of my mates a lift down that weekend. He'd done a bit on Flint, so my mate Scott, I'd give him a lift. So on the Sunday, I'm like, mate, you're going to have to come with me to bait up. Bear in mind, when you're baiting 110 yards with, 40 kilos of bait, you're not talking 10 minutes. So my mate, bless him, had to just sit there behind me, twiddle his thumbs, but he did, bless him.
That is a lot of bait to put up.
He did need a lift home. So but I can remember he was sat there, and I've wrapped the rod up to the range, which was just under 28 wraps, sort of 27 and a half, just over, in the 6 boy, while I'm still set up in there. I've wrapped it up on the wrap sticks. I've walked round to the 4 boy with a lead, chucked it out there. Bear in mind, this is the first time I've chucked a lead out in that zone, at that range. I had fished the 4 boy in the spring, but I was just whacking singles long towards the middle. This was the first time I chucked a lead on that spot since it went sour the previous autumn. But we're now in the weediest part of the year, and I've chucked the lead out there. It's instantly gone bang, and I sort of got about a 4 foot pull back. I thought, that's the one. I can remember turning around to my mate, and I was like, yeah, man, that's the one. I was like, come on, the baby black. Oh, that's literally what I said to my mate when I chucked that lead out. It just felt the one. To say the lake was super weedy. That zone by now, I'd seen a lot of bait over the 2 previous summers, so I could imagine it was sort of a bit crated out anyway. So I sat there on the Sunday. It was blowing a southeasterly, which is the perfect wind to bait that swim. It was coming from behind. The bait went out there beautifully, and I went home that week feeling happy as Larry, sort of thing, feeling like at least I got something. Bait's out in the pond, as close to the fish as I feel like I can bait.
Sorry, when you put that much bait out, so do you notice quick results off of a big bed of bait like that? Or?
It depends on the lake. I mean, when I was baiting Burghfield, especially if it was weedy, I generally found that it was a few weeks. It was to begin with on Engie. I think the only reason I began to get quick results from the 4 boy is because by now, this is the 3rd year I've now baited that spot. So for 2 summers, I've baited that zone really heavily. I've created a spot they like to touch down on as such. I've created a zone.
But potentially, even with a big hit of bait, did you say 40 kilos?
Well, you're talking 2. I'd say I call them 20 litre buckets. I actually think they hold about 18 litres. The big tall camo buckets, but you're talking 2 of them.
They're like dustbins.
Yeah, big buckets of bait. There's 5 kilos of boilies in there as well. There's a couple of kilos of tigers. It's not just seed, but it's a good hit of bait. But they do seem to like these big hits of bait on Englefield. That's how I caught all the big ones in the end.
And I know that you're putting I know that you're baiting and then coming back. But I mean, when you're putting rods out, how much bait do you actually think you're probably still fishing over when you're?
It's hard to judge. I like to think that most of it's gone.
Yeah.
I go by the theory that most of it's gone usually.
So you'll put it out. Hopefully they'll eat it, and then you're not putting as much out when you're actually fishing.
Well, when I fished Burghfield and I did it slightly differently. I'd bait really heavy. Because obviously the swim I was fishing, Speedboat Point, I mean, I did bait elsewhere, but I'm just using Speedboat Point as an example. I caught them from elsewhere and whatever, but Speedboat's a good example. Because that was a passing point where the fish would pass every morning into the snags. The fish weren't, in my mind, spending an awful lot of time actually in my swim. They were only passing in the morning, so I'd bait heavy on a Sunday, and they'd be essentially picking off at that spot all week, pick off it. And then when I came back on a weekend, using the bait boat, or whatever, I'd just fish for a bite, because when they passed in the morning on the way into the snags, I just, it's like setting a trap. So I'd nick a few off for the 3 mornings I fish, get a couple of bites each morning, then fill it in again on the Sunday. Plus, as well, if somebody did drop on your spot on the Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, then fishing over a hell of a lot of bait.
That's what I mean. It's a lot of bait, isn't it? So,
But Englefield was different.
Yeah.
I came by this, I'd caught a few of the good ones by this point over big hits of bait. Like, I'd get there on the Sunday and I'd still instantly go in with at least a 10 kilo bucket, probably.
Would you put a rig right in the middle of that?
Well, I'd put 3 rigs out there. I'd just fill
just
it
all
in.
over it.
Yeah, just fill it up in 3 rigs out there. Simple fishing, really.
Yeah. Effective fishing there.
Yeah,
Tom.
it is effective fishing. If you can get them on that bait, it is a good way to work your way through the stock. So, yeah, I forgot where I was.
So you
now.
put that hit of bait out with your friend.
So I've put that hit of bait out on the Sunday, big hit of bait. Knew it, just felt like it was the one. Even though I've just gone on again. Now I'm angling on what I think is going to happen. I haven't seen them there, but knowing they like that area in those kind of conditions that we were forecast for the next few weeks, it just felt like my best shout at the baby black. So anyway, I've come back the following week, which was the new moon, and I don't know why, but I was that confident I had the Wednesday off as well. I think it was mainly down to how busy the lake was getting. In my mind, I thought Thursday ain't good enough. I need to get there on a Wednesday. Plus as well, I was at a point now where I'm starting to think, I need to catch this fish. I need to get the job done. The lake's getting busy. It's only going to get busier. So I got down there on the Wednesday. Bit of a gamble as I'm taking extra holiday, but I got down there on the Wednesday, got the bait out, got the rods out, and nothing happened that first morning. Nothing happened the second morning. So nothing happened on the... nothing happened on the Thursday morning. Nothing happened on the Friday morning. I reeled in for the first time on the Saturday. Bear in mind the spot had felt beautiful. And I've reeled in on the Saturday morning. And the bloody hook baits were black.
Oh, no.
Black as the night. And they stank like... Not sour like they did the previous autumn. But just like horrible rotting silt. And instantly I thought... Oh no, spot's still bad like from the year before. Obviously, this is the first time I fished it since it went sour the autumn before. Sort of hoping it had, dissipated, but it hadn't. I thought, oh, bloody hell. Like all of a sudden I've gone from thinking, like, this is my best chance at the black. It's all sort of, the weather was falling into my favour, the moon was coming, and now my baits are stinking. I'm like, oh damn. If the lake was quiet by now, what day are we on? Yeah, no, it's the Friday morning. Yeah, sorry, we're on the Friday now. So I'd fished the Wednesday night, I'd fished the Thursday night, I'd reeled in on the Friday day, midday-ish, and that's when I realised my upbaits were stinking. I was like, oh, damn. If the lake was quieter, I'd have probably looked elsewhere. But it was that packed out by now, I had no option to move. So what I thought I'd do is just put pop-ups on. I don't like using pop-ups over bait, like especially seed. But I thought I'd put pop-ups out there. At least it sort of lifts my bait out the silt a bit. So I put the pop-ups out there. Next morning, they turned up on me big time. Big sheets of fizz coming up over the bait, and I'm that's what I needed to see, because I was so disheartened the day before to actually see them feeding out there on the bait, bubbles coming up. I started getting liners. I thought, well, at least I'll eat the bait in that.
What do you think the rancid smell was then? What do you think happened with the silt?
I don't know, but as it transpires, I spoke to another few lads in the next couple of weeks, and they were actually having it all around the lake. For some reason, the lake silt just smelt really bad that year in the whole lake. I don't know why it had done that year, and it never had been there before, but it transpired that it was the same across the whole lake. And so at least they were feeding out there. But anyway, I didn't get any bites, did I? I'm sat on my hands all morning looking at these. I'm thinking, why have I got pop-ups out there? So anyway, I've put bottom baits out for what is my last night, the Saturday night. I've gone back to my trusty old sort of Amnesia D's little wafter hook bait. And the next morning, I've had a bite. They've come in, they've fished. Within half hour, I've had a bite on the left-hander, and it's white tips again. It's actually quite a rare one, white tips as well, but I've had it, second time I've had white tips. So there's a bit of a trend appearing, a bit of a pattern appearing here. I caught a lot of them more than once. So anyway, I caught white tips again, and the interesting thing about that capture is that matey that caught the baby black the previous autumn braced it with white tips, and he caught white tips first. I'm pretty sure he did anyway. So all of a sudden I'm thinking, it was the new moon on the Monday. Now, although the baby black does love a full moon, new moon ain't bad either. It has been caught on new moons, and I've just caught white tips. They were out there the previous morning. It's a Sunday. I'm supposed to be going home. But I've pulled out all the stops to do the Sunday night. I just thought, I need to stay here. There's a chance here. So anyway, pulled out all the stops. So my trip's actually turned into a 5-nighter, which, like I said, it's a big gamble for me because I'm using a hell of a lot of holiday to do that in a short space of time. I like to spread my holiday throughout the year to get that kind of consistency. So I've done the extra night, full of hope and anticipation. Had a bite at 3 a.m. the following morning, and it turned out to be a 38-pound stocky. Same stocky that I caught at Christmas at 35 odd, and it was actually the third time I caught that fish. Just took a photo on the map, put it back. And then later that morning, about 6:30, I had a bite on the left-hand rod, picked it up, and it was obviously a good one. It's sort of took line all the way out to the middle on sort of a 50-60 yard run. I'm already fishing pretty long. And just as I've slowed it down, it's rose in the water, rolled once on the surface out of range, and the bloody hook pulled. Right, bang on the new moon, baby black sort of dew in my mind. I'd caught white tips the day before, and I've just lost what was obviously a big fish. I was like, for God's sake. I was devastated. But at the same time, I wasn't convinced it was the black because all the big ones in that lake were due at that point. What I did actually this trip, which was quite interesting, I didn't bait on the Sunday, and I didn't bait because the forecast was to go hot. Just literally, that day, in fact, it was warm that day, the Monday, and it was forecast to be hot Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. I mean, like nigh on 30 degrees. And I thought, after last year, the last thing I want to do is put bait out there and it goes sour. Oh, no, they're not going to be out there these next few days. Plus, the following trip wasn't a moon, which, as I've mentioned before, they're so moon-orientated, these fish. So I didn't put any bait out there. I've gone on the Monday, knowing I'd be back on the Thursday, which was 3 days later anyway. It's going to be red hot in the meantime. There's probably still a bit of bait out there. Got back on the Thursday. Now, we're out of the moon phase now. So I'll be totally honest. I didn't have very high hopes for this trip, just going by what the lake's like. It literally, it throws them out on a moon and then it doesn't on... It's that noticeable. I've never noticed it so much on any other lake, but they do love a moon in that lake. So I've got back the following week, and basically I just baited. Not a lot happened. I think a bit of bubbling one morning on the spot, but I was just mainly there really just to get the bait in, occupy the stream for another week and get the bait in. But what I did do is the forecast changed as well. So over the course of the weekend, the weather went back to that sort of overcast, wet, windy conditions. I took a hell of a lot of bait with me in preparation for the following week's full moon. Like, in my mind, that was my big chance. So I filled it in on the Sunday. Did that trip. Nothing happened. Filled it in on the Sunday. Got back to work, and I'd planned to get back on the Wednesday again, which was a massive gamble for me. Oh, I know I keep saying this about a massive gamble, but it is. Like, for me to use that much holiday in such a short period, I could have easily not caught it, and then I'm left short of holiday for the rest of the year. And doing a weekend on a lake like that, you're turning up on a Friday after work at 7 o'clock, you might as well not go. It's so like... Yeah. So anyway, I've took the gamble, got down there on the Wednesday, got the bait out, conditions look prime. I ain't gonna lie, I did feel massively confident that trip. The next morning, Elliot and Dave come down from Sipography. It'd been planned for ages. They were going to sort of follow me through with my last bit of fishing on the lake, follow the end of my campaign. So they've come down on the Saturday.
So Elliot probably thought he had a few, maybe 12 months or so out of this. Essentially, this is a bit of content for us.
So anyway, we've sat down, done a bit to camera. I sort of talked it up a bit, like I have now. How I felt confident. I was in a good zone. And that day, it was really windy that day. And I can remember, they wasn't like, they didn't want me, they weren't like trying to encourage me to redo my rods. But obviously doing stuff like that creates content. He was like, you're going to do the rods? And I was like, maybe later. But it was windy. The rods went out so perfect on that first night. The bait went out, everything went perfect. Then it was really windy, like I say, on the Thursday, and the wind just increased throughout the day. And I can remember it got to about 5 in the afternoon, and I was like, lads, I ain't going to redo the rods today. They were like, no, fair enough, but obviously, it's nice to have that as a bit of content in it for the film. But everything went out there that smoothly the day before. Only a few birds dived on me that day, and I just knew that I was going to have more of a headache trying to redo them rods than just to leave them. I could see no reason to reel them in. And anyway, I left them out 3 o'clock in the morning. I've had a bite on the right-hand rod and played it in, and it was one of the triplets. I thought, great, we got full moon trip, we sort of balls rolling now, they're out there, they're obviously feeding. I'd put a hell of a lot of bait out, so it's always nice to get that first one to know they're out there and you ain't overdone it or whatever. Anyway, so I've got one. Again, it's one of the triplets. One I've had 3 times. It was the 3rd time I caught that one. It's 3 triplets. One of them I didn't catch. One of them I had twice. One of them I had 3 times. But this one I'd actually had 3 times. It was just under £30. It was normally I'd have just put it back, but it was like 3 in the morning. I've texted Elliot and Dave, said, look, I've got one. And they're like, oh, please keep it. We'll come back. They were only just down the road. They'd gone and done a night on a lake somewhere down the road. Like, please keep it. We just want to see a fish, for the film. Anyway, so they've come back in the morning. We photographed this triplet, and I've done a bit to camera, and I probably didn't sound very enthusiastic. I was like, yeah, anyway, let the triplet go. And they've sat around for a bit, had a few teas, buggered off about 9:30. Bite time's gone then, really. Generally, everything, most fish I'd caught from Engie, pretty much. Bite time's up till about 8:30, max, really, for the majority of bites, anyway. So, in my mind, we're sort of well past bite time. And they've gone. And I was just sat there that morning having a tea with my mate Rich, who was set up in the swim to the right of me. And out the blue, the left-hand rod has just melted. 10 o'clock, the left-hand rod, 10 o'clock in the morning, left-hand rod's just melted out the blue. So I've picked the rod up, and this fish has just beasted me out to the middle, and just as I felt, just at that point where most of them, I just slowed down. It just started to slow, and then it's gone again. Another 40-yard run. I'm already fishing at 110 yards, and now this fish must be 200 yards out in the pond. I've got the waders. As it's taking line, I've managed to sort of struggle into the waders. I've waded out into the water. I've got as far right as I can in the swim. I always did that because there's a blue barrel at sort of 45 yards. There's this 4-buoy in the 4-buoy that's sort of 45, 50 yards, maybe 60, at 45 degrees to the right of the swim. Now, I'd had a lot of fish from the 4-buoy at this point, and I'd never had a problem with that buoy. A few had gone towards it, but the way the weed was in previous years, generally, I hadn't had a major problem. It wasn't a major issue. And most fish, in fact, kited to the left because it's a lot deeper around to the left of the swim in front of like the bomb swims and that. They would naturally go out, take line out to the middle and then kite round left into the deeper water. If I waded to the right of the swim, I felt like I was sort of encouraging this. Whether it made any difference or not, I don't know, but, every little helps. So I've waded out to the right of the swim, and I've got the rod tipped down to the right, and this fish is out mega range in the middle, just massive head shakes, like I'm fishing with braid, and like big bangs on the rod tip. Even at that range, I turn around to Rich. I was like, "This is a good one. This is like." And at that, like, he sort of tussled out there with it for a bit, and then it started gaining a bit. And as I've started gaining a bit, I've picked my rod tip up, and the braid's just kited, like lifted up out into the water, and it's picked up right out into the middle of the pond. And I can just see this fish is kiting right, rapid. I could just see my braid just cutting across the surface above the water, all bits of eelgrass and that hanging off it, and it's cutting across to the right of the swim. It's still well over 150 yards out in the pond, and I'm sort of gaining line, and I'm looking at how quick it's kiting. And I'm looking at this buoy to the right, and not only is there this buoy to the right at 45 yards, 60 yards, 45 degrees, about another 50 yards beyond that is another buoy. But I never worried about that because it was so far away. But I'm looking at this fish, I'm looking at these buoys, I'm looking at the speed it's kiting and how far out it is. And I've just I can remember saying to Rich, I'm like, I ain't going to make it. I ain't mecking them boys, like. So I've just stopped gaining line. I've stood as high as I could up in the swim. I've got the braid out in the water. It's windy as well. It's blowing a southwesterly. And I'm just sort of watching this braid slowly getting closer to the buoys. I say slowly, it was pretty quick. And I'm just thinking, I'm sort of hoping now that I can pass it over the top of the buoys by keeping the rod high. I was hoping it was going to clear them. It would have cleared the blue one closest, but it wasn't going to clear the further one. And I'm just sort of like, what do? I didn't know what to do. In fact, I'm just thinking, I don't want to bring it too close to the buoys because I don't want this fish to touch the buoys. So I'm just thinking, well, if it goes beyond them at range, at least I can sort of let it weed up and then decide what I'm going to do. And then just as it's got to the point where the like bow in the line that's lifted out the water is just sort of touching the blue barrel, it's just stopped. And I've just noticed it stopped. And like I thought, that's in weed, that is. And by some absolute miracle, it must have bedded it, got its head in a bit of weed just beyond that second orange buoy, about 2 rod lengths to the left of it maximum. Just beyond it had found weed and come to a halt. And the minute I realised it had stopped, I just dropped the rod tip and started cranking. I mean, the rod was doubled over, but I couldn't. The whole time it was moving, I knew, like, I thought, if this fish has got weed over its head, I need to keep it moving. If it kicks free of that weed, it's only got to swim a rod length to the right, and I am done for. Like, I could see the braid. It was literally, the blue barrel sat a bit more to the left than the orange one, and I'm literally 4 foot off the side of the barrel. You know, it's that fine a line, and I'm just beasting it. And as it got closer, I could see a bit of weed on top of the leader, created a bit of a bow wave, and that was sort of my marker. And this weed was getting closer and closer to the blue barrel. It's come past the blue barrel, and I'm thinking, right, I've got a 6 foot leader on there. So I've got it, you know, and once it's about a rod length and a half short, I thought, right, I'm clear. And at that moment, it just kicked on the surface, kicked free of the weed, and started kiting round to the left. I thought, thank God for that. Anyway, it's rolled a couple of times on the surface, and I could see the colour, that it's got like an orangey flank on it. I could see the size of it, and I'm thinking, that could be it. Like, anyway, it's rolled a few more times, and as it's gone in the net, it was actually quite deep. I've pushed the net down, got it in the net, lifted the net up, and it's got these like recognisable couple of scales on its left-hand flank, just above its sort of like fin.
Is it like 3 scales?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, and I've rolled it on, and I saw that in the net, and I knew what I'd caught. But still, my mate Rich was stood on the bank, and I was literally like, I've literally shoved the net under his nose. I'm like, Rich, is that it? Is that it? He's like, let's have a look. I'm like, that's it, innit? I knew it was it, but I needed somebody else to tell me it was it.
Yeah. There's lots of distinctive marks on that fish.
Yeah, and that was it. The baby black.
It hasn't got much of a lower mouth, that, has it? It's quite underslung, isn't it?
It's a funny old. They've all got that kind of like bull nose. They've got a funny mouth on them. You know, quite recognisable. They're all the same, apart from the lever. The lever is the only one in that pond that hasn't got that sort of snubby sort of bull nose on it. But yeah, mega fish. It weighed just over 48 pounds, so it was actually bigger than I'd ever imagined. You know. I was expecting, I was sort of fishing for a 45.
They're real classic looking carp in those lakes. They really are. They're just, like you say, crusty backs and everything. I mean, that's...
I tell you what, Elliot did me proud with the pictures as well. Like,
well, he's got his money's worth in the end, didn't he? By being there at
well, he was all over in a day.
Yeah, I know. I mean, a little bit too short maybe, but I mean, Elliot seems to be at the right place at the right time sometimes, doesn't he?
And certainly brought me some luck that trip. So I was so happy. I caught it at just the right time, I think, because like I say, the lake has been so busy this year.
It has, until about a year ago. We walked around in Englefield about 7 years ago. I have to admit, the lake didn't really appeal. It's not like Burghfield but it's had a history of big fish. There was a big mirror in there, like years ago,
there was a leeny in there.
That's it.
Called Twisty Mouth.
Yeah.
It did do 40, I think. Although I think it did.
Which most then was a really
really
big
fish. Mainly it was sort of known as a sort of upper 30, 38, 39 pound. Very rare fish. Only ever did a few captures. But back then you had some of the best names in carp fishing Englefield for that Twisty Mouth.
It seems to be a continuous lake.
So they died off. I mean, the fish that are in there now, the canal fish, they actually came from the river. About 20, I don't know the exact year, but about 20 years ago now.
They didn't come from Dinton or somewhere.
No. They were in the River Kennet, and I think matchmen were sort of bit fed up with getting smashed up by carp when they're having the matches on the river. So they fished quite a few of them out there. I think they put maybe 25 into Engie, but there was still a handful of original leenies left in Engie at the time. So the blokes that were fishing for them when they had this influx of like upper double, low 20s from the river in there, they were catching them and chucking them in Flint. So there was only about a dozen left, and the baby black's like one of that dozen. But obviously now they're all...
Everyone's happy, aren't they? That's a little different story now. But I mean, that lake has become a lot more popular.
Yeah.
Because you have got that set of fish on there as
you
well.
You have, and I mean, they've got bigger. I mean, ultimately, the fish have got... It's a club ticket. The fish have got big. People want to catch them.
Fair play. Yeah. People are, anglers
Can't
already.
blame them, can you?
No, exactly. We've got to talk about Burghfield a little bit before we finish this podcast because I will get shot.
Let's go then.
No, I mean, obviously, Burghfield was, that was like the crowning glory, fishing in that area. I mean, like looking at that, would you go back to that lake if you knew exactly what you had to put yourself through? Because that was...
No, I wouldn't. I mean...
You wouldn't. Are you being honest there, Tom?
I wouldn't go back to fish for the Burghfield Common, not just because, but like, I mean,
but knowing exactly what you're letting yourself in for, trying to fish for that carp.
Exactly. It was. I wouldn't want to put myself through. I mean, I could get lucky. People do get lucky. No
one's got lucky twice with that one.
No, and obviously I do know the lake a lot better now. I probably know the lake better now than when I caught it. You're learning all the time. I still keep in touch with that lake, but no, I wouldn't want to go back and do that again. I mean, it was an intense sort of 4 and a bit years fishing. That was for me, but I wouldn't change it for the world. I mean, I always had these dreams about Burghfield. I aspired to fish there. I aspired to catch that common. And I always listening to Ozzy's story personally and reading Nigel's book years ago. I almost had this sort of fairy tale idea in my mind on how I was going to go to Burghfield and catch him. And that I played that fairy tale out. I couldn't ask for it in hindsight that, the way I caught them from all around the pond, I caught them all, really. There's not a lot I didn't catch out that lake. I had the full-on Burghfield experience. And, I do miss it, but I won't want to change those memories. That's it. No, that's Burghfield done for me. Really.
Yeah, certainly. Why don't? Because the Burghfield Common, what's it been 14 times now, isn't it?
14.
No, because it's just got caught.
Yeah,
again,
Greg's was the 14th capture.
Yeah. But it's not the only fish in the lake as well. We won't get into sort of individual people and other fish too much with that. But it's not the only fish in the lake that doesn't get caught very often.
No, there is one really big fish in that lake, a mirror. It is a stocky. But it is bloody good looking and it is very big. I never caught it. In fact, the years I fished it, we didn't even know if it was still alive, but it has been caught since at a massive weight. And you do think, if the common died, it would give me something to go and fish for. But I don't know. I couldn't see. I don't know.
There's a lot of talk with it, with a common that it gets hooked and lost a lot. Do you buy into that?
Not really. I do think it gets lost occasionally, but if it got lost as often as people thought it did, its mouth would be battered. It'd be trailing all the time.
Doesn't look like that, does it?
Everybody I've even got a story myself about how I potentially lost it. But everybody who's fished Burghfield and caught a few has got a story of how they lost the common. I don't think it's getting lost that often, to be totally honest.
Why do you think it's so hard to catch?
Just because, just the nature of the lake. It's a big lake, big deep lake. A lot of sort of areas that can't be reached. A lot of islands, a lot of snaggy channels and areas that the fish, can wise up. A wise carp can evade angling pressure completely in Burghfield if it wants to. But just everything with Burghfield makes it such a challenge. The layout of the lake, it's the logistics of just getting round. I mean, you can get in certain swims, like the bomb compound, certain times of the year, bait to the minnow and catch them. But to actually fish that lake properly in the summer months, takes an incredible amount of effort, footwork, baiting.
It's a real summer fish as well, isn't it?
It is. It's done one capture in October to John Holt. It's done one capture in April to Scott Lloyd. Everything else pretty much comes between the end of April and August. Hottest time of the year. In fact, 75% of that common's captures are within a few weeks of spawning either side. That's obviously the time of the year that it drops its guard. I'd imagine the warmer weather draws it into shallower water, and
it likes the shallow, warm water.
It does. A lot of its captures have been from relatively shallow water. Scott did catch it from 16 foot though, which is interesting.
But that was pre-spawn though, wasn't it?
Pre-spawn in the spring. Scott and Nige, I think, are the only people that have caught it, sort of pre-spawning, I think.
So those two are almost... I mean, you say 3 captures, when you're talking about 14 captures in the last, nearly 30 years. I mean, it's still, it's still... But yeah, I mean, those 2 captures do stand out as being, not comparable to all the other previous captures, because like you say, most of the time it is just...
I've just thought there was a couple, I think Darren Day and Burghfield Dan, I think they both caught it May time as well, just before it spawned. But yeah, it's definitely a window of opportunity there, when it's red hot. It likes hot days.
And everyone that's fishing there knows that anyway, don't they? So, I mean, is everybody that's fishing there, are they all geared up for the Burghfield Common? Because it sounds like...
I wouldn't say everybody. I mean, it's a 50-man syndicate. And don't get me wrong, anybody who's got that ticket could catch it. But generally, you can sort of narrow it down to a handful of anglers that... There's only a couple of people every year that actually go on that lake and suss it and catch them consistently. Most people go on Burghfield. And other than that little window in the spring and the autumn where they get out in front of bomb and compound and they're catchable and anyone can go in there and bait bow, for the rest of the year, when they are spread out around the pond and it's weedy, most people just haven't got a clue. Bless it. I don't know. I don't want to sound like...
No, you're I don't want to sound like... But there is obviously...
that's when the effort... that's why I struggled the first couple of years, because although I was seeing them and finding them in areas, it's as well for a big lake. It was one of the spottiest lakes I've ever fished. You've got these swims that cover massive amounts of water, and when I was catching them, it would generally be one small spot, one rod that was doing the bites.
So has anyone actually? Can you think of captures on there where someone has turned up and pretty much just fishing open water, normal fishing, and caught it?
Just like randomly caught it? No.
That's right.
No, not really. I mean, Scott caught it in the spring, but it was a zone that I'd seen it show there, believe it or not, my first year. I mean, that zone that Scott caught it from, it hadn't been fished for the previous few years, and he did just sort of bait boat out to the middle, dropped a tiger nut and caught it, but, he did use an echo sound. It was the base of the shelf. It was a full moon, and in hindsight, there's a few things that go into that capture in hindsight that it does all add up.
When you're talking about Scott's capture, it is very interesting.
Yeah,
like a tiger nut on its own at the bottom of the shelf.
Yeah, I mean, I know he did put bait in the boat, but it was boilie crumb and a bit of seed. And I'm telling you now, in 16 foot of water, not a lot of that landed around the rig, did it? There might have been a bit of a scent around the rig.
It gives you something to think about.
Our guess, he was pretty much fishing a single tiger at the base of the shelf, in an area of the lake that hadn't really been fished for probably 5 or 6 years at that point. It had been fished previously.
What's Scott's take on that then?
I don't know. I ain't spoke to him that much about the actual capture, really. But no, fair play to him.
but like you say, that one does stand out because it. I mean. You know so much about the lake, but I mean, you just don't seem to see we know the captures when they happen because they're so rare.
Well, it's every capture of that fish is teaching us more about that fish.
Yeah.
Prior to Dave Lane's capture, Ozzy's capture, prior to Ozzy's capture, everyone was convinced that it only fed and was catchable in like the north side of the lake, really shallow ground. That is north of Barnet. All its captures had been from there. Oz was the first person to catch it on the south side of Barnet's. He caught it from the scaffold swim, but it was still shallow ground. Dave Lane then caught it from the swim he made, But that was in the sort of ski club area, deep water. It's all sort of 14, 16 foot, but I'm pretty sure he caught it off this bar that sort of comes up to 8s, 9s. So it was a shallower area amongst a deeper area. But again, that showed that it don't just feed in shallow water. You know, it ain't just catchable in shallower water. And that was 2 captures then south of Barnet. And then Scott Lloyd's capture, which was the next capture, was from 16 feet of water on the. And so all of a sudden, like, it's all adding up. Like, this is just a normal carp that goes around the lake and feeds like every other carp. It's not this mystical shallow water feed. It'll only feed there and it won't feed there, you know. But it's done so few captures that, you know, each capture is telling us all a lot more about that fish's habits. But I did worry then, because that was 3 captures on the bounce then that all came from the open water. So that was a bit of a worry for me. I started to think, hang on, because years ago, historically, it used to really like the sort of dogleg weedy bay area. In fact, like 6 of its 14 captures have come from probably 1.5 acres, 2 acres of water. Like a few swims in that area, but that was a real hub of Burghfield Common captures. You know, that was where you'd fish for the common. But we're going back, he hasn't done a capture in that zone for like 10, 12 years now. That, to me, that's history now. That fish has wised up. It's not feeding so much it still gets in the dogleg and weedy bay, but unless you're incredibly lucky, you know.
But it's definitely learning every time it gets caught.
It is. Yeah, I just think that's gone. But then I started to think, well, maybe these 3 captures being in the open water now, unless you're not fishing towards the middle, perhaps you haven't got a chance. But luckily, with speedboat, as I mentioned before, it sort of fishes to this snaggy channel. This sort of snaggy, and I'd sort of clocked the fact that this snaggy channel was an absolute magnet, not only for the common, but for every fish in the lake. You could walk round to the bailiffs, wade onto this little island, get up the tree, and up this tree, looking into these snags in the channel, I'd seen everything in that lake in them snags. I'd also seen the common various other places around speedboat on the shallows in Telegraph Bay. All areas that I knew it would have to come through the swim. And like, I'd caught a few of the other good ones, classics, saddleback. That's how I sort of narrowed it down to there, that I just thought, it's coming through here a lot. I can catch it from here. And a lot of people, a lot of my mates who are locals, who'd known that lake a lot longer than me, pretty much told me that I wouldn't catch it from there. And if I did hook it from there, I wouldn't land it from there. But I was convinced, and I stuck it out.
What, just because it would go down that channel? Or?
Yeah, just because of the nature of Speedboat Point, and the common's known as this like mega fighting, you know, beast of a carp. But the reality of it is, a lot of that comes from history. You know, we're fishing with a lot more beefed up tackle these days, and I'd caught a lot of fish out of that swim. I felt like I was fishing in a manner where I'd landed pretty much I hardly lost anything. I didn't lose anything to snap hooks or line or snags, or I lost a couple to hook pulls, but a couple out of probably 70 fish I caught from speedboat over the years. You know, I was angling in a manner, and I was catching it. I was working my way through the stock that I just thought, I've got a good bloody chance of it. And the main draw to speedboat was this snaggy channel. Now, lo and behold, Greg's capture is from this snaggy channel, which ultimately, I mean, if I was still on there, I'd probably be like, fucking hell, he's caught that from under my nose, you know. But
so has he caught it pretty much in the same place?
Yeah, that's it. So basically, Greg's capture actually backs up my theory about this snaggy channel, that nobody, to my knowledge, I don't think, people knew they got it, but I don't know if anyone had clocked the significance of this channel beforehand. But it is a major magnet for the fish daily through the summer months. They love that snaggy channel. Most people didn't even know that you could wade on that island, climb up that tree and look in them snags. And whether they knew or not, most people couldn't be bothered to do it, because you've got to either carry waders around the lake or just pull your shoes and socks off, pull your trousers up and walk across.
Do you think it'll get caught from there again?
I don't know, because not where Greg caught it from, because I mean, there is a little bit of controversy over that. Basically, you ain't supposed to fish in that channel. I mean, Greg did. He got away with it. He caught it. Fair bloody play to him. But now that, you know, security, I think, will be on top. People ain't going to let that go on again. So hopefully it becomes a safe zone for them again. But I'd imagine that area will get a lot of pressure now, because all of a sudden they're like 2 captures now on the bounce and come from around that snaggy channel. You know,
it almost sounds too obvious for that fish to get caught from there for a third time.
I don't think it will. I mean, if you look at the captures of that common, the last sort of 5 or 6 captures now, it's all been, every capture has been caught by somebody who's been sort of pushing the boundaries of what has been done before on that lake. You know, just sitting in a swim, spawning at 80 yards, and putting 3 pop-ups over the top.
God, I wish it was that easy.
Ain't going to quite cut the mustard. Like, you know, you need to be doing that little bit extra. Something a little bit, you know, not dangerous, nothing like that. But there's, you know, these sneaky little things. You know, there's a few little things I've seen in recent years. I thought, I'm talking about Burghfield still. But, you know, I thought, you could get out there and do that. And do, like, it's these little things that will ultimately catch it, you know, I think.
Yeah,
that's my theory anyway. You know, gone are the days where it just swims into the margins. I mean, you know, I know when Terry caught it at the edge, it actually got caught 2 consecutive years at the edge there. Now, I did see it in the dogleg, Weedy Bay.
We've got a picture of it in the margin, Tobe. Have you got?
Let's have a look.
There is a margin picture of it, which I think. Just have a look anyway. We'll carry on talking, mate. Don't worry if. But yeah, it did. It was always. That's the one, Tobe. Thanks, mate.
Oh yeah, bit of video that is.
I've seen Fortis put this up as well. I mean, it's quite a good advert for their glasses, isn't it? This.
Yeah, what a beast.
Did they sell a few sets of wraps on the back of this? It is a beast, isn't it? Even it's sometimes hard to put a fish into perspective. But when we're looking at the Burghfield Common now, in what channel was that?
This was right down the bottom of the dogleg. This is an area of the lake. It gets in. Now, it's a funny old fish. To say how rare it is by far the most predictable fish in Burghfield. It turns up in, you know, dogleg, Alsatian, regular. No other fish in that lake turns up like that. But
all on its own like that?
Generally, yeah. A lot of the time, all on its own. Or it'll have like one mate with it, or, you know, one little mate or something. To begin with, the first couple of years, or the first year at least, probably the first couple of springs, when I'd see it, I'd fish the dogleg, Weedy Bay. I had nothing else to go on, and you can't help but fish. When you're seeing it like that, you can't help but fish near it. But the reality of it is, in hindsight, I was probably a million miles away from it, really. But it was all exciting.
It didn't look very interested in feeding there, did it? It's like that's going somewhere.
It turns up in those zones, that regular, and you've got people. It'll literally turn up that 10 foot from the bank, you know, as far as those chairs are away over there. And I'm sure you can hear people talking, you know, people are stood around it, they're taking photos, they're filming it. It's done this for years. I'm sure it likes the attention. Yeah, mega fish to see. Mega, just
exciting to see. But you said you saw it quite a few times. You'd see it. You'd see it.
Towards it, like, you know, you would. But to be honest, towards the end, I sort of stopped looking for it, because I'd sort of that, like, say, I really do think. I mean, I say this now, and somebody will catch it in the next couple of years back in the dogleg or something. But I'd sort of came to the conclusion that type of angling for that fish, it's wised up to picking up tigers in the edge down in the dogleg, if you know what I mean. It would get in there, but I don't know. You
know these other less caught fish in the lake as well. Do you see them as well?
No.
So they're even more mythical.
Yeah, well, this is the thing. You know, like the fish we were mentioning earlier, this big, massive mirror that's probably a 60-pounder now. You know, it ain't even feasible to go back and target that, because when it was caught at nearly £60 last year or whatever it was, it hadn't been out for years, like 11 years. I've never seen it in the edge. I mean, it must just live out in the middle or something. I don't know. It has been caught since, funnily enough. Funny how fish do that. And it went years uncaught. And then it actually come out twice last year. It come out spawned out in the summer as well. But yeah.
But it just goes to show there's hope for lakes, aren't there? When you've got big lakes like that, you're not necessarily going to see them.
You know, the nature of that lake. I mean, look at the size of the common. I mean, the common is a testament to the quality, the water quality in that lake. If a boilie had never gone into Burghfield, the common would still be that big.
Right.
And, you know, it's going to continue. The Burghfield Common, the end of the Burghfield Common is not the end of Burghfield.
No.
That lake will continue to throw up monsters for the foreseeable future. I mean, you've got a handful of 50-pounders in there now. Like I say, this mirror that's edging up to 60-pound. You know, there's a lot of future in Burghfield yet, no doubt.
It's an awesome lake, mate. And your capture as well, because you were saying about the bait boat stuff, and you know that they'd been previously, before Scott caught it, there'd been a gap where. Did you notice in that period where they weren't being used on the lake, were less fish getting caught?
Yeah, well, the first couple of years I fished that lake, it was a completely different lake to the lake I ended up fishing. Basically, when I joined it hadn't long been sold by Cemex. It changed hands, and we couldn't fish the majority. We probably could fish actual water, probably about 40% of the lake. The first year I did catch a few. Well, I think I had 26 fish, but 21 of them 26 fish came in one spell in the autumn where I managed to clump them from this really heavily weeded area in Goose Bay. But the following year was a real headbanger, and I think that was down to that just worked out that where they were getting fish for, and they weren't. They were showing every morning in this out of bounds. Bait boats were banned. You couldn't get anywhere near them. The third year I fished that lake, it was still the same. You still had all that out of bounds, but I'd sort of suss the areas that they did like to get in the summer when it got really weedy, and by baiting those areas well before they turned up, I actually had my third year on Burghfield, I actually had a spell in the summer where for 13 consecutive weeks, I caught at least one fish from 3 different swims. Like around like I really sort of felt like I had them, you know, dialed as such. And that was all casting as well, no bait boats then. But then my 4th year on the lake, which was the year Scott caught it, everything changed. That winter, they reopened a lot of those areas.
Why did they decide to do that?
Because we lost one bank. Again, a change of hands meant we lost one bank, the Rawlins Bank. That was only 3 swims, 3 quite significant swims, unfortunately. We lost that swim Laney made, the ramp swim, and the scaffold. 2 of those 3 swims had done common captures, so it was a bit of a blow. But the consolation was, to keep the syndicate happy, they managed to sort of get permission for us to fish a lot of these areas.
Right.
Bomb Point was reopened, the compound was opened, Alsatian Bay was reopened, No Carp Bay was reopened. And to me, who'd done 3 years of hard, well, I'd had that bit of a year off when I went back to court, but 2 and a bit years of hard angling on that lake, with most of it being out of bounds and it being a real headbanger, it was like the promised land, you know, it was like that. And we now had permission to go back there. And not only could we fish all this zone, they reintroduced bait boats. So not only had the fish not been fished for in these areas for such a long time, they were now getting fished for with bait boats again. And they got absolutely clumped. Obviously, they got clumped from those 2 open water springs in the spring. I never even got a look in Bomb Compound being a weekender. But to me, to be honest, I had this theory. The week before Scott caught it, I'm pretty 99.9% sure I'd seen the common in that channel, speedboat channel, and I'd caught my first fish of the year. But then, and I was convinced in my mind that with all that angling pressure out in the middle, all the stock is getting caught, bait boats going out there left, right and centre, that common wasn't going to hang around. I really was convinced it wasn't going to get caught out there. Well, Scott proved me wrong. But what that did I could have easily pulled off then, I suppose. A lot of people would have done, because I'd caught a lot of them by that point. But not all of them. And in hindsight, I'm glad I didn't, because that year was by far my best year. At that point, my best year on Burghfield had been the first year when I caught 26 fish. Second year, I only caught 2, but that was in the spring, and then I didn't fish the rest of the year. Third year, I caught 24. And then that year, I had 52 fish.
That is mental.
And it was is because I had these spots. I'd already been baiting. I knew the lake, and the bait boat just, like, they got clumped from those open water swims in the spring. But that in turn then push the fish around the rest of the lake, because all of a sudden they wasn't safe out in the middle where they'd been safe for the last 5 years. They went all around the lake, and the whole lake fished incredibly well that year. I had a 7 fish hit one morning from speedboat, 3 40-pounders on the bounce. Fishing like that just wasn't even, possible in the previous years. They just didn't come into those. So yeah, it was nice it was good to see, having fished that lake for that long, and then all of a sudden to have that, it was like, it was a breath of fresh air. The lake, dare I say it, that year Burghfield seemed easy. I think the reason it seemed easy is because I'd obviously put a lot of time and effort in the previous years, and I'd sort of worked out what I needed to do and where I needed to be. And the bait boat was just a deadly weapon. It meant I could drop rigs back on the spots in the morning, and they wouldn't even know. You could get 2 or 3 or 4 or sometimes 7. That was a one-off, but you could get regularly. I was getting 2 or 3 a morning, just one after another. Bait boat, drop it. They don't know, but it was interesting because they very quickly wised up to that sort of bait boat tactics, those small patches of bait, etc. But no, it was a good year. To be honest, although Scott caught it in the spring and it was a blow at the time, I'm so glad I carried on that, because that was my dream year on Burghfield, that was. And then the following year I went back, carried on doing what I was doing, and ultimately...
Well, that's what you do. You seem to go through the stock before you get, and what you're after is it tends to be the last one that you catch.
Unfortunately, I'm not one of these lucky buggers that seems to turn up and bang it out first.
I think it's a nice way of doing it.
I wouldn't mind doing that one day.
One day. Well, maybe next time. Maybe with the next fish that you're after. What about so that area that Dave Lane caught that fish from? Is there any chance now that the fish could just start being seen and massively spend a lot of time over there now?
The difference now is there are Simon Scott and another chap, Mike, the school teacher, we refer to him as because he's a school teacher, bless him. But Simon Scott and this chap called Mike have both got permission to fish over on that bank. They don't do an awful lot.
So is that where it's going to get caught from next?
If I had a ticket on that bank, I'd like to think I had a good chance.
Come on, Simon, you need to get our fish for it.
It's definitely a good zone. Definitely. I mean, like I say, the common's been caught twice out of them couple of swims out over there. And
so that would be your fancied area if it was going to get caught.
If I had a zone that I had to pick, that was my zone, like it's theirs, and they fish it all year, and that you can't pick a better. It's like sort of central in the lake. You've got deep water, you've got the shallower bit. Yeah. It's more so, a spring, autumn, winter zone. They do get there in the summer. In fact, Dave Lane's capture of the common was June time there, but mainly it is a sort of early spring and autumn zone. But if you catch it from there, then it's going to be bloody big. It is a good. It's definitely got common potential. But that's what I was getting at. At least there is some angling pressure over there now. It's not like it was those years when I was first joining the lake, where nobody at all could fish over half of the lake and they just lived there. At least there's some degree of angling pressure now going on all around the lake again. So, to an extent.
Yeah, it's got to be a good thing.
Burghfield's back to how it was to an extent. Burghfield's Burghfield again.
That's a challenge, that is. Hey, Tape, just before we wrap this up, let's put some pictures up of the common. We got some video footage, haven't we, of Tom's crowning glory.
Oh, it's an awesome car.
I liked it when you said when you caught it as well that you weren't sure whether it's a Burghfield common or not.
Well, okay, right. Deep down, I did know. But I don't know. I tend to do it with every big one I catch. I almost need somebody else to come and say, right, that is definitely it, mate. I mean, it was well spawned out as well when I had it. Well,
spawned out at £53.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, I've got it. Yeah, when I got it in the net, I as soon as I saw those lips coming to the net, I knew it was it. It's in the net. I sort of beached it on the shallow gravel. I'm kneeling down next to it. I was like, I've looked at the length of it. I thought, that's it. That's the common. And I don't even know what happened in the next 30 seconds. It's all a blur. But I went from kneeling down next to it to having it bundled up in a sack in about 30 seconds. And I don't know how I did it, but it was in the sack. And I've tied it up. I've put it in the net, tied it to the net. Rang just 2 of my mates, my mate Byron and my mate Chris Gardner, and I was like, lads, I think I've got it. Then all of a sudden, I did the same with the baby black. Although I've seen it's it. When it's there in the sack and it's out of view, you start to doubt yourself. Is it it? Is it really? I don't know.
I remember. What's it like holding that fish? Because we got a bit of video here. Yeah.
Bloody hard.
Are you actually in the moment there?
Yeah, like
I remember because Oz has done a podcast with us, so we've talked about the Burghfield Common with Oz.
I saw that today.
It's coming out
today.
So yours will be after. But Oz said that when he actually got it on the bank, it was like a lamb. It just went all.
Don't move.
It gave up the.
Don't move.
Yeah, behaves itself.
Yeah,
likes having its picture taken.
It does. I tell you, but yeah. Mega moment. I'll never forget that day. Never.
Mate, we could talk for another hour, 2 hours
Sorry
on this. We were going for 2.5 hours, but like I say, no, it's been a great podcast. The thing is, you tell a great story, but there's so much information. There's so much you can learn from just listening to what you say as well. The thing is, you make carp fishing sound. When you see someone that's really, really good at something and they make it look so easy, but it's
cheers.
That's
It's quite a compliment. Thank you.
No, it's no worries. It's great talking to you. So. So coming up, you're just waiting to carry on Flint for the rest of the year.
Yeah. That's where I'm heading now, actually. So I've got probably a 2-hour drive now across to Reading. But yeah, I'll probably stick it out on Flint. I mean, I can hopefully get a ticket for this lake in October, but there's no dead cert there. I don't know and October's never the best time of the year, is it, to start on a lake? You sort of
it could come out. It could come out then.
But people are going to be doing their bits, aren't they? People are going to be baiting.
It's busy, Tom.
I know, exactly. And there's going to be a lot more people with a massive head start on. It's not the best time of the year to be honest. I might do a bit in the winter when it might be a bit quieter and I can just sort of get a feel for the lake.
Get caught out there in the winter.
Don't tell everyone. We ain't mentioned the lake, have we?
No, we're
all right. We're safe.
No.
But no, I'll probably stick it out on Flint for. I don't know. I'm just enjoying a bit of relaxed fishing at the minute. It's busy late, but I'm just sort of.
Well, I'm going to join you down there, mate.
Yeah, no, it'd be nice to see you.
2 weeks' time, I'm going to start fishing there. So, once again, thanks for coming on.
No problem at all, mate.
Enjoyed it. We'll do it again.
Yeah, definitely.
Thanks, Tom.
No worries, mate. No worries.
The Thinking Tackle Podcast.